thanking the organizer for this opportunity, this conference that is really a pleasure to be here and with the colleagues, and thinking also to the future of our investigation. But I want to take the opportunity to remember the past of early research in Oman that started for the Italian archaeologist exactly 50 years ago, and is just a challenge for the future, because I want to remind that next year the seminars will be in Bologna, and you are all welcome. Just to remember the past, I feel a legacy of late Professor Maurizio Tosi that started the investigation in Oman, and I think most of the Italian scholars here present, they belong to his activities during this long period that is spent in Oman. And I will focus in the specific period that is early Bronze Age, especially the first part of early Bronze Age, that is well known because exactly Maurizio Tosi and Serge defined many years ago as a period of the Great Transformation. So many changes comparing the previous period of 5th and 4th millennium BC. And these changes are representing a development. So we need to intend not a fixed step in the history of Oman, but is a continuing transformation with continuing modifications. Especially for the funerary landscape, this is one of the main features that is characterizing the landscape of Oman, and we have the signal of large and huge demographic increase since these so-called Afit graves are spread in all the territory of Oman. We need to interpret this abundance, this density that is very unusual if you compare to what we know and what happened in the earlier period. If we try to compare the individual burial with the collective burial of a fit tomb, it means obviously this demographic increase, but also social transformation. As well as in the settlement, we have as well the transformation of poor structure with well-planned architecture. So when we try to understand these changes, we recognize that something could come from outside. We have the archaeological proof for, especially for few vessels that are goods in the earlier fit burials. We have the introduction of new architecture that is made of mud brick, and also the model of the houses that we will try to understand later in HD6. They belong to a model that is the tripartite plan buildings, even if we have here with a very reduced size. Comparing with the Mesopotamian one, we have really different dimensions. Other things you will know very well, that is the introduction of the date palm cultivation. So also this could be also endemic, but the real development is surely connected to somebody that introduced cultivated species. We have also the large exploitation of copper and the pyrotechnological skills. So not only copper, but also some material that were fired at a very high temperature, over 1000 degrees. We are looking also for something that is characterizing the inner relationships. And there are very few, because we know very few about the settlement pattern in the interior. But we can appreciate especially the characters of the coast, and we have obviously the evidence of exploitation and also exchange of marine food products. We have also the evidence of shell and stoneworking relating to ornaments, vessels, This is a tradition that belongs even to 5th and 4th millennium BC, and normal working of stone tools and lithics. So in this interpretation, obviously we know that the lifestyle changed completely. And we try to understand if these changes are related to global changes connecting with the great civilization of Mesopotamia or the Indus Valley. But we need to expect that this transformation, maybe they didn't realize, they didn't happen contemporary, so at the same time, and in all the regions. So this approach is trying to suggest that the investigation could take care about the differences among what we need in this understanding the landscape of early 3rd millennium BC. So the case study of the regional Sharqiya, especially the Eastern Sharqiya, is a real good opportunity to enter in the topic, to analyze the settlement pattern, to analyze the funerary landscape, because we have hundreds of these burial complexes and few traces of settlement, but maybe enough to understand what happened in this period of transformation. So with this regional approach, it's possible to evaluate local characters and in a general view, in a general adoption of the evidence of transformation. So, for example, in the funerary rituals, the collective and monumental burials. But also for the settlement, I will try to summarize quickly the evidence of the settlement excavated in Ras Al-Ad, HD6, that belongs to the very end of the 4th millennium and the early centuries of 3rd millennium BC. In this case, we have very unusual documentation because it is very rich, and we have at the same time settlement and the cemeteries. Cemeteries are distinguished in two complexes named HD10 in the southern part and HD7 in the northern part of the settlement. Just summarizing the features that we recognize in HD6, first of all, the chronology, that is early centuries of 3rd millennium BC. We have the evidence of really project of plan architecture with a stone wall encircling the buildings, and the buildings are made with mud bricks, so very, very different from what we have in earlier period. But also in the contemporary situation, we have the evidence of very poor structures made of stone. I show here the example, one of the few examples excavated, that is RJ13, in which we have a very poor structure made of a row of stone with oval shape and very few evidence of archaeological finds, especially flints and conus shell work. The other feature of Ras Al-Ad, and especially the settlement of HD6, they are related to the local and regional exploitation of resources, except copper that is coming from the interior. But there are no other imports. So if we expect these international relationships, in this case, we cannot recognize no pottery, no special object that will characterize the later period of Umayyad. The subsistence is based on local marine resources. There is also the evidence, even very poor, of breeding animals and the exploitation of plants, among them dates. We found a lot of stone dates that are connected with the cultivation of the date palm. What is characterizing the site is especially the craft, working, producing continuously beads, stone beads, shells, working shell like conus to make rings or to make disc, to make some insert of mother pearl. One of the main feature is the evidence of a stone wall that is defining exactly the space, so excluding what is outside to what we have inside. So this is a kind of a model that is a real transformation comparing the evidence of poor structure of 4 millennium BC. But is also the evidence of social relationships of the people that they decided to build such a complex. And as I told you before, HD6 remain unique in the region, unique for the location that is just next to the sea. And we try to understand the reason, the meaning of this settlement. It is not very easy because since there is no other imports respect copper is local, is Omani, so we cannot understand very well the evidence. According to me, is just the projection of the Oasis Society that established a place along the coast as a landing place for boats. But since we do not have any imports from outside, we cannot close this interpretation. So I go further because just to summarize the effort they made to build such a complex, they prepared beside the stone wall some specific foundation with stones or with mud brick, and they built this model of house that is so-called tripartite, made of one corridor, one long room in the center, and a small room on both sides. What is new in this phase is especially the mud brick architecture with bricks that have the same size approximately, because we have many examples and we can establish different measurements, but they have the main size of what was found in Ely, what was found especially in Bath recently under some of the towers excavated by the American mission. So this is the real evidence of the great transformation, and is connected with the exploitation of local resources, especially demonstrated by these large ovens, and is something that needs to be investigated again, at least for a project of valorization. So I spent many years trying to convince the local institution to profit of this evidence and to exhibit to visitors, to tourists, because it is a real part of the Omani history and archaeology. When we jump to the funerary landscape, at the beginning, we imagined the same model that we can recognize in the northern part. So this is one of the best drawing made by Ricardo Merlo, trying to exploit the evidence, the archaeological evidence of Ras Salad, and he imagined, according our suggestions, the so tall tombs that are characterizing the northern part. We know that this is a huge documentation, and we know that according to recent studies, especially from Kimberly Williams, will be updated even maybe today, but we know that they could depend from chronology. So it has been established that we have transitional types of this cairn, but I will suggest also a huge regional variation. So we started the excavation of the cemeteries around HD6, and as recently from 2023, just until now, because the last excavation finished a few days ago, we can characterize better the evidence of these so-called fit tombs. So the tombs here are arranged in small groups, usually from 4 to 6. They have been in the past replaced, so some of the tomb was abandoned, and this structure are very, very not, the height is not more than 1.5 meters, and they have specific characters like the location of white stone around the evidence. The most important thing are the presence of cremated bones and the presence of a strong evidence of activities carried out outside of the burial. So quickly, we have a few dates, C14, establishing that they belong to the early 4th millennium BC. The evidence of cremated bones is really huge, so it is anticipating what we thought before, that was a character of Umanar period. And the evidence of settlement activities is strongly documented by several objects and also archaeological layers, documented by flint tools, conus workings, steatite and beads working. So we decided, quickly I will show you, to be sure that it was not the presence of a settlement, and we documented the location of each object found in the surface or found in some trenches of the excavation. And we discovered that all these, they belong exactly to the point where we have the burials. I go quickly to close. This is the evidence of a transit survey made recently, in which we can identify more objects next to the graves, but nothing between the groups, so nothing that is suggesting a settlement. We started the excavation of HD10, because since we had this suggestion, it will be more and more interesting to document what Sandro Salvatori excavated in 1999, even to arrange also the 3D model that is easy to realize. So we excavated also the corridor. We found also in HD10 the location of human bones outside of the chamber. And this is a real novelty comparing what was already published. So quickly, the last thing is this external ring of white stone that is symbolic, is typical of the Sharqiya, this oriental space, because we found also in RJ6, in Shia, and in several tombs of HD7. We could compare with the reconstruction of one Afid tomb in Bath, but I will underline that is different, since is not the complete facing of the tomb, but is only one ring at the base. Concluding, we have the opportunity in this region to understand better if the relationships was established among the group of families living in the settlement, that they had their own group of cairns. Is difficult to demonstrate, but is one of the future steps. And the changes of these burials could be interpreted with some of the burials that were abandoned while they were constructing a new one. So the continuity of the group, the location, but changing the number of the final evidence that we have in many cemeteries, so corresponding not to contemporary structures, but in a different way to see the evolution of the each cemetery. So I go to the conclusion, thanking obviously all the support of local Khamis bin Nasser Al-Amri and the local institution of the ministry, and also the participants coming from the University of Bologna that were trained, and we do hope they are the future of the archaeological research. Many thanks.
Thank you, Wes. Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. Muhammad Al-Isai. Muhammad Sia. Okay, Muhammad Al-Isai, you're going to talk to us about soft stones, crafts, production and exchange from the late 4th to the end of the 2nd millennium BC, a comparative archaeological study of Oman, Eastern Saudi Arabia,
South Iran.
and Southern Iran. Okay, interesting. Just for those who doesn't know Muhammad Isa, maybe I can just give a brief introduction. We didn't give it for Professor or Dr. Katani because he's well known. Okay, that's Muhammad Al-Isai is a specialist in Bronze Age studies of the Oman Peninsula, with a focus on the Hafid, Nar, and Wadi Souq periods. He holds a master's degree in archaeology from the University of Bologna, and currently serves as an assistant director at the Bat Al-Khatim and Al-Ain archaeological site. Okay, he has participated in several archaeological field projects and has extensive experience in site management, documentation, field survey, material analysis, and the application of digital tools in archaeology. So,
تعد الأواني الحجر الأملس من أكثر اللقى الأثرية انتشارا في مواقع الخليج خلال الألف الثالث قبل الميلاد، وقد عثر عليها في سياقات متنوعة تشمل بيئات سكنية وجنازية وطقسية، مما يعكس تعدد وظائفها وأهميتها الاجتماعية. وعلى الرغم من كثافة دراسات سابقة، أن معظمها ركزت على مناطق أو مواقع محددة معالجة دون معالجة مقارنة شاملة تربط بين الإنتاج والتوزيع والأسلوب عبر أقاليم مختلفة، وما تسعى هذه الدراسة إلى معالجته. إذا تكلمنا عن الإشكالية البحثية والسؤال البحثي، تنطلق هذه الدراسة من إشكالية رئيسية تتمثل في فهم طبيعة شبكات التبادل المرتبطة بأواني الحجر الأملس. هل كانت هذه الأواني، أو السؤال البحثي اللي نحاول الإجابة عليه، هل هذه الأواني كانت مجرد سلع متداولة، أم أنها شكلت وسائط لنقل المعرفة التقنية والهوية والأسلوب؟ ويهدف هذا البحث إلى تحليل الأنماط الإنتاج والتقنيات والزخارف والسياقات الأثرية ضمن إطار إقليمي مقارن. أوكي. تشمل الدراسة من عدة مواقع في إيران، وعلى سبيل المثال نتكلم عن موقع تبت يحيى، وهو من أشهر المواقع الرئيسية في الإنتاج وتصدير أواني الحجر الأملس. طبعا الموقع ليس فقط لكونه مركز إنتاجي، ولكن تم أيضا العثور على محجر لاستخراج المادة الخام للحجر الأملس. وطبعا هناك عدة مواقع أخرى في إيران، بالإضافة إلى طبعا دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة من نار، وهو موقع محوري خلال العصر البرونزي، كذلك موقع شمل. وهناك بعض الدلائل على تصنيع الحجر الأملس في هذا الموقع، بالإضافة إلى مليحة ومركز دور، وكذلك أيضا هيلي في دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة. ومن هيلي ينتقل إلى سلطان عمان، وعلى أن نبدأ من موقع قميرة ويبعد عن هيلي تقريبا 50 كيلومتر. وإذا تكلمنا عن موقع هيلي، تم العثور على تقريبا 82 قطعة أثرية، بينما في قميرة تم العثور على تقريبا 69 قطعة أثرية من الحجر الأملس. وهناك أيضا من المواقع الرئيسية مثل بات والخطم والعين، وكذلك رأس الحد ورأس الجنز الذي يعتبر مراكز ساحلية فاعلة في التبادل التجاري. أما بالنسبة لرأس الحمراء فهو بداية دلالة على صناعات الحجر الأملس، ولكن في نهاية الألف الرابع لم تكن هناك أواني من تم يعني في الخرز أو مشغولات أخرى. أما الميسر، نعود لما نتكلم عن الميسر نعود للبحث أيضا عن مواقع التصنيع في الألف الثالث قبل الميلاد، وإحنا نتكلم هنا الدراسة تشمل الألف الثالث، لأن إذا جينا العصر الحديدي هناك طبعا تم العثور على عقير شموس فلاتين، وهو موقع ضخم جدا جدا، بالإضافة إلى موقع آخر وهو حي العقر. وأثناء عملي على هذا الدراسة تم الموقع العثور على الموقع الثالث، وهو يبعد وهو في صحار. فإذا تكلمنا بين الموقع اللي فيه صحار وعقير الشموس وحي العقر، كل موقع يبعد عنها، كل موقع يبعد عن بعضه تقريبا 20 كيلومتر. ولكن للأسف الشديد إلى الآن لم يتم العثور يعني على المصدر لهذه الأواني الفخارية. طبعا في الأواني الحجر الأنبث. طبعا بالنسبة إذا تكلمنا العصر الحديدي، تم العثور وتم إعلان في مؤتمر أبو ظبي الماضي عن وجود موقعين بالقرب من عقير الشموس من حي العقر. طبعا إذا تكلمنا عن المنهجية، اعتمدت البحث على المنهج مقارن إقليمي يجمع بين التحليل النمطي والزخارف والدراسات السابقة. تم تصنيف الأواني في الشكل والزخرفة وآثار تم تصنيف الأواني وفق الشكل والزخرفة وآثار التصنيع وربط سياقاتها الأثرية المختلفة. هذا المنهج أتاح فهم الأواني بوصفها منتجات مادية وحوامل لمعادن، وتحمل لمعاني اجتماعية وثقافية. أما إذا جينا عن التحليل الفني، التحليل الفني أظهرت دراسات أن اختيار الحجر الأملس يعود إلى خاصيته الفيزيائية لتحمله للحرارة، بالإضافة إلى ليونته. وكذلك تشير الأدلة إلى وجود تسلسل إنتاجي مشابه عبر المناطق، يشمل اختيار المادة وتشكيل الأواني، التفريغ الداخلي ثم الصقل والزخرفة. ومع ذلك تظهر اختلافات إقليمية تعكس تكييف الحرفيين مع المواد المحلية والتقاليد التقنية. طبعا من أصعب المراحل التصنيع هي العمل على تفريغ الأواني من الداخل، هي المرحلة الثانية. حتى إنه مثلا إذا تكلمنا على المخلفات، دائما نجد أن الحرف هو تم صنعها من الخارج، ولكن عندما يحاول أن يفرغها من الداخل وتشكيلها من الداخل تتلف. ولذلك على سبيل المثال إذا خذينا عقار الشموس، يوجد تقريبا أكثر من 1.5 طن جمعا من الأرض هي مخلفات تصنيعية. طبعا الزخارف الشائعة الموجودة في الزخارف الشائعة الموجودة في هذه الأواني، إذا ابتدينا بإيران نجدها تختلف. بعض الزخارف تختلف عن ما موجود هو في شبه الجزيرة العمانية. ولكن على سبيل المثال لاحظت أن هذه الزخارف أيضا منتشرة في الفخاريات. فأمس حتى كنا في القاعة الأخرى كان في عرض عن الفخاريات، وكان ظهرت رقم 39 لكن في فخارية، الصورة رقم 39. أيضا لاحظت أن بعض الفخاريات موجودة على سبيل المثال في بات، تم العثور على الفخار المشابه للنقوش الموجودة في الحجر الأملس اللي عثر عليه في إيران. أما في شبه الجزيرة العمانية فهي اختصت بنقوشها وزخارفها، حتى أنه مثلا على سبيل المثال تم تصنيفها أن هذه الزخارف العمانية والتي تبتدأ من 1000 الثالث قبل الميلاد، اللي هي جات على شكل دوت أند تو سيركل، يعني نقطة في دائرتين. وبعدها في فترة وادي سوق، طبعا وادي سوق كان في هناك كثافة إنتاجية لهذه الأواني الفخارية، وهناك كان عدة أشكال مع الأغطية. نلاحظ أن هناك استمرت وجود النقطة، على فكرة أحيانا تكون نقطة مع دائرة، وأحيانا تكون نقطة مع دائرتين مع زخارف أخرى، وهذا النقطة مع دائرة حتى الآن مستمرة. يعني لاحظت أن أحد الحرفيين كان يصنعها إلى الآن، عندما سألته كيف أنت يعني لسه، قال حصلت أنه على حبر التاريخ كذا يصنعها، فأنا استمريت على صناعتها. طبعا نتكلم عن التبادل والتوزيع. يظهر الانتشار الواسع لأواني الحجر الأملس وجود شبكات تبادل نشطة عبر الخليج. على سبيل المثال تم جزيرة تاروت في المملكة العربية السعودية وجود جميع الأنماط في عام 73 هناك أثناء إقامة مشروع تم العثور على العديد من الحجر الأملس. وفي جزيرة تاروت تجمع بين الزخارف اللي هي موجودة في إيران وبين الزخارف العمانية. طبعا هناك تبادل تقني أيضا، وتبادل تأثير رمزي بين المناطق المختلفة. طبعا تشير النتائج إلى أن أوان حجر الأملس تمثل مؤشر واضحا على الترابط الثقافي الإقليمي، فالتشابه التقني والزخرفي يعكس تفاعل مستمر بين مجتمعات الحرف، وليس مجرد تقليد أحادي الاتجاه. كما تظهر دراسة قدرات المجتمعات المحلية إلى إعادة تفسير المعرفة المشتركة ضمن أطر اجتماعية ورمزية خاصة. على سبيل المثال في إيران يتم تصنيع هذه الأدوات هي نخب، بينما في شبه الجزيرة العمانية ورش قد تكون على شكل عوائل. النتائج خلص البحث إلى أن التشابه النمطي والزخرفي يدل على ترابط ثقافي قوي بين عمان وشرق المملكة العربية السعودية وجنوب إيران، كما يعكس التنوع التقني اختلاف أنماط التنظيم الاجتماعي بين نمط اجتماعي في الجزيرة العربية وإنتاج أكثر مركزية في جنوب إيران. وتؤكد دراسة أن أوان حجر الأملس كانت وسائط تقنية واجتماعية ورمزية في آن واحد بسبب تشابه التفرد. على سبيل المثال الأواني في شبه الجزيرة العمانية عن مختلف الأقاليم الأخرى. ومع ذلك هل يعني هناك جدال، أنا أطرح هذا السؤال أيضا، إذا كان في نقدر نتتبع مصدر جيولوجي لهذا المصدر الحجر الأملس في عمان، هل يعني بسبب وجود هذا التفرد النمطي فبالتالي هو صنع هنا في عمان؟ قد يكون أيضا تم إحضار الحجر من أقاليم أخرى، وهذا رأينا يجادل فيه الآثاريين السعوديين على أنهم معهم أنه تم إحضاره من اليمن، ولكن هل تم أيضا في عمان إحضاره من مكان آخر؟ أنا أستبعد ذلك لكون وجود النقوشات الخاصة بعمان، فبالتالي إذا كان هو جابها مصنوعة في إقليم آخر فبالتالي راح تكون هنالك تشابه أيضا مع الإقليم الآخر. أثناء بحثي أيضا لاحظت وجود بعض الأواني جاءت من أقاليم أخرى وإن كانت محدودة. على سبيل المثال أتوقع أنه لاحظت أيضا من اليمن، وفي متحف العين الوطني على سبيل المثال عندهم بعض الأواني من العراق. طبعا القيود في هذه الدراسة يواجه البحث بعض المحددات مثل نقص البيانات التحليلية وقلة مواقع الإنتاج المنقب عنها والفجوات الزمنية بين نهاية الألف الرابع والألف الثالث. يعني مواقع الإنتاج في الألف الثالث لدينا بعض الأدلة في شمال في دولة الإمارات والميسر في المضيبي، بعكس العصر الحديث لاحقا حصلنا طبعا في ورش. إلا أن هذه التحديات تفتح آفاق مستقبلية تشمل التحليل الكيميائي والتنقيب الموجه واستخدام التوثيق ثلاثي الأبعاد ونمذجة توزيع نظم التوزيع، كما تبرز أهمية التعاون الإقليمي في هذه الدراسات المشتركة بين الأقاليم المختلفة. وفي الأخير أود أشكر كل من ساهم في هذا البحث، وعلى سبيل المثال المشرفون والباحثون البروفيسور موريزيو كاستاني والمشرف دينيس فرينيز، بالإضافة إلى المساعد المشرف، وبالإضافة إلى من دولة الكويت كان دكتور حامد المطيري، ومن المملكة العربية السعودية دكتور عقاب العتبي مدير عام لآثار بهيئة التراث، اللي كان يتابع معي حتى بعد إتمام الدراسة ويتواصل معي. أما الجهات والمؤسسات فهو طبعا جامعة بولونيا اللي أنا أنتمي إليها، في سلطنة عمان المتحف الوطني ومركز سلوت الأثري، دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة متحف اللوفر، بالإضافة إلى هيئة دبي للثقافة. وشكرا لحسن الاستماع.
شكرا على هذا البرزنتيشن. Thank you very much. أي سؤال؟ any questions?
Question by Arabic or English?
Okay. هنا.
موزة.
صباح الخير.
صباح النور.
Good morning everybody. شكرا على الورقة. بس أنا عندي أنا ما متخصصة في التاريخ، ولكن بناء على عملي الحجر الأملس في عمان هو أصلا كنوعية حسب الدراسات اللي تمت هي أصلا كلورايت.
نعم.
كلورايت أيوه.
نعم.
فهذا شيء يميز عمان.
نعم.
يعني النوع الصخور الموجودة في إيران وفي الهند هذيك ستاتايت. أيوه. بس كمعلومة. بالنسبة للسيركلون دوت أصلا هذا معروف في كثير من الحضارات إنه هو موجود. يعني موجود هذا دائرة ونقطة هي أصلا رمز للشمس. فكثير في الحضارات موجودة ما بس فقط في عمان. بس للعلم.
نعم. بالنسبة للمصدر أتفق معك. مثلا المملكة العربية السعودية عندهم طلق. بالنسبة للدوت أند تو سيركل يعني إحنا حصلناها في السوفت ستون العماني. قد تكون موجودة، قد تكون أيضا موجودة في الحضارات الأخرى.
Okay, شكرا.
عفوا.
Any other question? Okay, شكرا محمد. Thank you very much. Okay. Good. Now we move to other subjects also related to the early Bronze Age. It's about the living and the crafting at the edge of Arabia, the early Bronze Age settlement system of Ras Jins, presented by Valentina Azara and Alexander Dirori. Please. It is. Oh, you need to take it down closer there. Exactly. Good.
Works. Good morning, everyone. And first of all, thanks to the organizers of this conference for the great organization and for inviting me to give this contribution today. Works, yes. So I will present a synthetic view of the Ras Al Jins settlement system, focusing on how the sites of RJ2 and RJ3 together help us understand settlement patterns and socioeconomic transformations during the early Bronze Age in coastal Oman. Rather than treating these sites in isolation, I will approach them as part of a single integrated settlement landscape, particularly during the Humanar period, and use this case study to reflect on broader cultural and societal developments in southern Sharqiya during the 3rd millennium BC. As many of you know, Ras Al Jins is located at the easternmost tip of the Arabian Peninsula in coastal Sharqiya, where excavations have been conducted for almost 4 decades, starting with the Joint Art project directed by Serge Clézieux and Maurizio Tosi since the 80s, and where we resumed explorations in 2017. This is a marginal environment in many respects. Fresh water is scarce, and harsh environmental conditions make agriculture practically impossible. Yet, the bay offers exceptionally rich marine resources and a strategic position along coastal and maritime routes. This combination of environmental constraints and opportunities plays a central role in shaping settlement choices, subsistence strategies, and economic organization throughout the occupation of the area. Excavations carried out over the past 4 decades revealed that the bay was occupied repeatedly over a very long time span. We have evidence for late Neolithic occupation from the second half of the 4th millennium BC, followed by a Feet period settlement during the early 3rd millennium, and finally by an extensive and long-lived Humanar occupation lasting roughly from 2600 to 2000 BC. What is particularly important is not just the longevity of the occupation, but the fact that the function and organization of the settlement changed substantially through time. So we have documented a very long sequence, but I'm going to focus now on the Bronze Age evidence. The evidence for Afit occupations has mainly been found at RJ3, excavated in the last decade. During this period, the area presents several stone structures and alignments of post holes that indicate the existence of short-lasting shelters, mostly associated with dark, ashy layers and a series of fireplaces and pits, hinting at food processing and other sorts of domestic activities. The material culture of these spaces is quite distinctive from what we'll see later for later occupations. Here, we have a series of tools that we didn't find in the more recent occupations at RJ3, and namely fishing toolkits. While on the other hand, traces related to any sort of craft production are virtually non-existent compared to both the Human period at the site, as we'll see in a moment, and contemporary Afit settlements known in the region, like Rasalad HD6 that Maurizio Cantani just mentioned earlier. This suggests that during this time the area was a settlement mainly oriented towards fishing activities, or most likely a fishing campsite. The Lithic sample supports this interpretation with a large presence of opportunistic tools related to non-specialized activities. The picture is very different from the Human occupation, during which we have a much broader view of the occupation. So during this period, RJ2, RJ3, and RJ4 should be understood as part of a single settlement system associated to the graveyard of RJ1. Although they are located on different areas of the bay, together they form a settlement covering approximately 3 to 4 hectares, continuously occupied throughout this phase. This spatial arrangement and the very different archaeological signatures that they display suggests a deliberate organization of activities at the scale of the settlement, rather than a simple accumulation of independent occupation areas. RJ2 represents the main residential nucleus of the settlement. For the Human period, it presents a long stratigraphic sequence organized into successive architectural compounds occupied over a period of about 5 centuries. Through time, we observe a series of transformations that affect spatial layout and organization of activities, as well as growing investment in construction. These changes are not merely technical, but reflect transformations in how domestic spaces, social units, and collective life were structured. The first two, Human occupations, period 2 and period 3, are characterized by mud brick architecture built with molded and standardized module of varying size. A major shift occurs at the beginning of period 4, when mud bricks are entirely replaced by rammed earth constructions. Walls now include 2 distinct types: massive load-bearing walls reaching up to 80 centimeters or even 1 meter in width, and lighter partitions. In several cases, mortared stonework and supporting posts are directly integrated into the masonry. And together, these features strongly suggest the presence of a second story and mark a broader transformation in building practices. From the outset, these structures display clear planning and standardized building techniques, indicating construction by skilled labor and a deliberate investment in durable architecture. At the same time, the spatial arrangement of the buildings evolves through time. During period 2, the buildings are aligned along the same axis, and at the end of the occupation, some of the structures are connected by internal doorways. During period 3, this kind of arrangement is replaced by the construction of a complex progressively organized around a common courtyard, with internal connections between the different buildings, or rather between the different parts of what becomes a unitary building. In period 4, we finally see the crystallization of this system, with each building organized from the outset around 3 sides of an internal courtyard. This transformation in spatial layout appears to reflect a broader cultural reorganization. This interpretation is supported by a range of analysis focusing on spatial configuration and circulation, accessibility, and the distribution of finds and techno-complexes. I cannot go into detail here, but taken together, they highlight a clear organization of activities and shed light on both horizontal and vertical relationships among the individuals and groups occupying these buildings. These patterns point to the existence of clusters of affiliated groups and suggest increasingly tighter bonds within each cluster through time, a trend crystallized in period 4 and possibly centered on extended family units. Besides, and unlike earlier occupations such as RJ3 and Ras Al HT6, the settlement of RJ2 displays functionally specific buildings with clear segmentation of space and a degree of separation between domestic areas and manufacturing activities, or at least part of these activities. In any case, RJ2 provides abundant evidence for domestic life and subsistence strategies, with the exploitation of aquatic fauna playing a central role. Fish remains indicate that part of the catch was processed into surplus through cooking and smoking practices, attested throughout the sequence. Period 4, however, marks again a clear intensification with the appearance of large-scale installations interpreted as smoking chambers for fish curing. These features, together with the faunal evidence, point to intensive exploitation of marine resources, particularly large pelagic species, and indicate production strategies that went beyond simple household subsistence. So these dwellings also document a range of craft activities related to the production of both utilitarian and non-utilitarian objects. As mentioned earlier, a degree of segregation between domestic and crafting activities is visible, with certain buildings like Building 9 and 10 showing clear evidence of manufacturing, including copper working. Compared with earlier Hafid occupations, or peak period, both Ras Al Jins and elsewhere in the area, these remains indicate technical advancement and increasing specialization, reflected in more standardized operational sequences, more specialized tools, and more refined objects. It is also worth noting that during the transition to period 3, we begin to see the emergence of functionally specific areas outside the buildings, most clearly illustrated by a workshop dedicated to copper melting and casting in the southern part of the settlement. Across the bay, the picture at RJ3 is markedly different. Here, we do not find permanent residential architecture. Instead, excavations revealed at least 5 phases of ephemeral huts and prepared working floors, repeatedly rebuilt over time. The spatial organization and the nature of the remains indicate that RJ3 was not a residential area, but a function-specific zone within the broader settlement. These huts were associated with craft activities, primarily the manufacture of shell and stone ornaments, which was the main activity at the site during the monarch period. For this production, we documented the entire operational sequence from raw material preparation to finished objects. The assemblage displays abundant production debris and unfinished pieces, as well as highly specialized toolkits, including perforators, drills, and the so-called conus slabs used to stabilize shells during perforation. Interestingly, while these slabs are also tested at RJ2, they occur there in much smaller numbers, despite the larger excavated area. Useware analysis of the perforating tools confirmed intensive and repetitive working of hard mineral materials, pointing to specialized craft production, particularly shell processing. These tools also provide further evidence for activity segregation. While ad hoc flake industries were produced both here and at RJ2, Vincent Charpentier highlighted that the blades used as supports for specialized tools were made at nearby sites, such as RJ5, close to the major flint outcrop. So they were made elsewhere. It is also worth noting that despite the presence of copper tools, fishing toolkits are entirely absent at RJ3, in sharp contrast to RJ2, where fishing toolkits are abundant. This evidence reinforces the interpretation of RJ3 as a specialized workshop area associated with the residential core at RJ2 during the monarch period. I won't have time to go into detail here, but RJ4 also shows a distinct archaeological signature, pointing to an area devoted to the extraction and likely processing of raw materials for the mud bricks used at RJ2, with several elongated shelter-like structures. When these sites are considered together, a clear pattern emerges. Residential life, food processing, and storage were concentrated at RJ2, while craft production was at least partly segregated at RJ3 and RJ4. This separation did not imply independence, but rather a functional complementarity. The settlement was organized at a scale that allowed activities to be spatially distributed while remaining socially and economically integrated. This organization marks a decisive step towards economic diversification and intra-site specialization, integrating fishing, food processing, and craft production into surplus-oriented systems capable of supporting exchange networks. Overall, this period is characterized by clear changes in the archaeological record at Ras El Jeans, including the expansion of the settled area, the evolution of architectural patterns, the emergence of extra-regional exchange, and increasing craft specialization. Within the long-term continuity of occupation at Ras El Jeans, these developments reflect significant transformations in local community and the growing social and economic complexity that unfolded from the end of the 4th millennium BC onwards. A diachronic perspective reinforces this interpretation. During the 5th period, occupation at RJ3 was oriented towards different activities, with subsistence practices and spatial organization contrasting sharply with the later role as a manor workshop area. This transformation highlights long-term processes of reorganization in subsistence strategies, labor allocation, and settlement planning. Ras El Jeans thus offer a key case study for understanding settlement patterns in coastal eastern Arabia, revealing a planned system characterized by functional zoning, skilled labor, and economic integration. The Manor settlement, combining RJ2, RJ3, and RJ4, represents a coherent and well-organized socioeconomic system in which residential, productive, and subsistence activities were integrated across space. Importantly, this level of organization, which reflects increasing social and economic complexity, was achieved without urbanization or centralized political structures, illustrating perfectly the alternative pathways to complexity that we see in early Bronze Age Eastern Arabia. Thanks again to the organizer of the conference, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you very much, Valentina. Thank you for this interesting presentation. Thank you. Okay, any questions? Derek? Wait. Let's make a shot. No need to street. Shot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valentina. You present this excellent, and I always find very convincing analysis of the development of housing plans at RJ2, and which is your thesis and so forth, and linking it to social structure. But I just wondered if you have any thoughts about how that, which starts, I think you're saying at 3600 or 2600 or thereabouts, how does that link to HD? Any ideas about how that might link to the house plans that Maurizio presented in HD6 earlier? Do you see that as any sort of? Is there any possible continuity in the in the idea of house plans and structures, or do you see a complete break? Do you have any thoughts on the interconnection between the two? Thank you.
Well, thank you for this question. Actually, I'm very happy to respond because I studied these architectures widely for my thesis. So what we can see is definitely the same measurement systems, for instance, at both sides, which indicate clear continuity. The plans are different, but at both sides there is a great degree of planning beforehand. Although at RJ2, for instance, the walls are more, so the building techniques are more normalized. We already have normalized building techniques at HT6, but they become even more normalized during later phases, indicating more specialization. As for the plans themselves, they are quite different. The models are quite different. And the long series of spatial analysis I had done indicated that for HT6, each building, basically a hosted household, which was probably composed of a nuclear family, and there were specialized rooms within each buildings, but each buildings looked like the others. So all the buildings were very similar. While at RJ2, the situation is different. So you have these clusters that come together, and they might relate to extended families, or in any case, a larger household. But this happens through time. Actually, at the end of HT6, you see also clusters that start organizing around a courtyard. So that could be the beginning of what happens later at RJ2 with these larger clusters, which, and at the end of the period, in period 4, becomes really crystallized system. Okay. So I think that's continuity.
Thank you, Valentina. Any more questions? Oh, okay, Moza.
Thank you so much, Dr. Valentina. I have a question regarding the RJ3, the huts.
Yes.
Does any connection with Ras Al Hamra because it's had a similar kind of structure?
This is much later, so it might be similar building techniques, let's say, but you have this sort of huts a bit everywhere along the coast. And in general, this is a typical way, let's say, of building these structures, but there's a very big gap in between the two. So there is no actual relation between them.
Thank you. Just last question regarding, we noticed that there's a few mythology element there, copper. Is any source of raw material around the area?
No. So as also Maurizio mentioned earlier, the copper most likely came from inland areas, and it was probably traded. They were producing ornaments. I know these sites in the area, they were producing a massive amount of ornaments that they might have traded to obtain copper.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Good. Thank you, Valentina. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, I have a supper.
Good. Now we move to another subject, but it's all still related to the early Bronze Age and also to Ras Al Jins and Ras Al Had. Okay. Today our speaker is Elena Maini and Matteo Promiti. She's gonna talk to us about tracing dolphin exploitation along the Omani coast, zooarchaeological evidence from Ras Al Had and Ras Al Jins, 4th to 3rd millennium BC. Please go on. Okay, I'll choose your presentation. Good, you have 15 minutes, yeah?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck. Good.
Okay. Thank you to be here. Thank you to the organizer, and good morning, everyone. My colleague and I would like to share with you the last update of this research project that explore the human-dolphin interaction in prehistoric coastal Oman through the development and application of a dedicated zooarchaeological protocol for odontoceti remains, combined systematic recording, osteometric analysis, and contextual interpretation to assess how dolphins were procured, processed, and integrated into coastal subsistence strategy. Despite the central role of marine resources in subsistence economies of prehistoric coastal community in Oman, dolphins were relatively understudied category, poorly integrated into broader discussion of cetacean exploitation in prehistoric context worldwide. Dolphin exploitation is well documented in the Caribbean, in particular in Panama, in the Black Sea, and in the Southeast Asia, for example in Indonesia, whereas it remains poorly documented in the Western Indian Ocean. To address this gap, this study considered animal remains recovered from several sites located in Ras Al Had and in Ras Al Jeans Bay, both in the Asharkia, with a chronology spanning from the late Neolithic to the Aphyt and Human-Ar period. Since the earliest excavation in the area, much of it published in the Journal of Oman Studies, dolphin remains appear again and again in excavation reports and faunal lists, but they have often been identified only in a very general terms, such as dolphins, whales, or merely as marine mammals. Only a limited number of studies have considered dolphins an integrated component of coastal economies, already mentioned by Mosseri Marlio, Charpentier, an issue addressed more explicitly only in the recent large-scale research project. Archaeological and ethnographic evidence suggests that dolphins were exploited for their skin, meat, and for fat. The high body fat content of dolphins, particularly blubber, may have played an important role in non-agrarian economies such as those in Ras Al Had or in Ras Al Jeans, helping to compensate for the lack of the key component in the human diet. However, several big questions remain unresolved. The main challenge lies in determining which dolphins were exploited, how they were procured, processed, through which strategies, and how these practices are linked to dolphin behavioral patterns in coastal lagoonal environment. When we started, the problem was clearly not the absence of dolphin remains, but the lack of effective working criteria to deal with them in a coherent archaeological data set. To address this question, the first step was to develop a dedicated analytical protocol. The pilot project was tailored to address a methodological gap in the study with an approach combined systematic recording, osteometric measurement, and comparison with modern reference collection in close collaboration with the Natural History Museum of Oman. Starting from its reference collection, we divided the dolphin living in the Omani waters in 4 categories, according to their size. We can have small dolphins, medium dolphins, large dolphins, and we admit also the possibility to recognize very large dolphins, for example, killer whales that are basically not dolphins, but in more close to dolphin. We adapted the method developed by our colleague Yuri van den Hurk to the skeletons kept in the museums and moved to develop a dichotomous key to distinguish vertebra remains, which by far represent the majority of remains we recover in the archaeological sites. This distinction between different vertebral elements is particularly important because, according to the literature, vertebrae differ in fat content depending on their anatomical position in the vertebral column. Then we extended the analysis to cranial and appendicular elements, such as the flipper bones, in order to expand the analytical possibilities. Finally, we applied the method to the skeletons, to the animal remains recovered in 6 archaeological sites, 2 in Ras Al Jins, RJ2 and RJ3, and 4 in Ras Al Had. Just a small sample from HD6, just for the pilot project, HD1, HD5, HD2. And we apply the protocol, and the protocol was successfully tested and proved to be both effective and reliable, and the early stage to this analytical work was published in 2024. But season by season, we expanded both in terms of sites and chronological coverage. The main core sites have been implemented or concluded, and the project now includes the Iron Age site of Inkitat in Dhofar and the site of Tel Abrak in the UAE. Within the DEXPO project, we have begun to exploring periodic bone morphometrics as a tool to refine the taxonomic identification of archaeological dolphin remains. Building on established protocol for odontocity periodics, we developed a suite of linear measurement and derived indices designed to capture both size and shape variation. As you can see, is quite easy to distinguish these bones that are anatomically in this position in the skull of dolphins, where the size of animals is very different, but becomes more challenging when their size are comparable or overlapping. Preliminary scatter plots combining linear measurement and proportional indices allow size and shape variation to be examined together. Archaeological specimens fall within the record ranges of Delphinus sp, light green area, and the small Stenella species documented in the Natural History Museum of Oman collection in the light blue area, but the archaeological record remain totally distinct from other taxa such as Stenella ceruleo alba, the blue dots, and Tursiops, the green dots. Although explorative, these results indicate that periodic morphometric can improve taxonomic resolution and merit further analysis. Let's move to the discussion. If we look at the dolphin size distribution, a clear trend emerges, showing a predominance of small-sized dolphins. At the same time, when we consider the NISP values, so the number of identified specimens, with only small samples, only the big samples are informative, while the small samples are, as expected, less reliable. So we can remove it. If we look at the sample from the main sites, in this case by genus, by genera, NISP values decrease, mainly because genus or species level attribution is based only on a limited number of vertebral column elements, skulls and flipper bones. Spinner, striped and spotted dolphins, all belonging to genus Stenella, differ primarily in habitat preference and activity. Spinner dolphins are known for shallow water daytime resting and for their acrobatic performances. Spotted dolphins prefer pelagic, tuna-associated foraging, while striped dolphins are deep water resident that rarely join with other species. The spinner dolphin, Stenella longirostris, is the smallest dolphin within the genus Stenella. The other two species, Stenella ceruleo alba and Stenella attenuata, suggested by the application of the new methodology based on periodic bones, may not be present in the archaeological record and overlap the average size with the common dolphin, which is classified as a medium dolphin. Common dolphin occupied a wide range of habitat, from nearshore areas to open sea. Moreover, in the Indian Ocean in particular, the common dolphin are also known to associate with tuna, as they share similar prey and follow the same schooling fish. Finally, about large dolphin, rhesus dolphins prefer deep offshore waters, are specialized cephalopod eaters, mainly nocturnal, whereas bottlenose dolphins prefer nearshore environment and are opportunistic fish eater. This gives you an idea of the range of opportunity humans have had to interact with various dolphin species at Ras Al-Had and Ras Al-Jins during the prehistory. More variability in terms of species is reported at HD5, located on a rocky hill on the beach and characterized by two occupational phases, one in the Neolithic and one in the Bronze Age, but also at HD1, located between beach and lagoon, the Al-Hajar Lagoon, and dated to the Bronze Age. While, if you note the 35 elements identified by Genius at RJ3, a site located directly on the flat beach, belongs all to small or medium animals. Moreover, HD3, at RJ3, non-vertebral element, most of all skulls, are more abundant than at the other sites, suggesting on-site processing of largely intact entire carcasses of dolphins. RJ3, which already mentioned also by Valentina, functioned as an area hosting different craft activities closely connected to the nearby site of RJ2, also yielded another interesting information about heat treatment. RJ3, in particular in the human hour period, approximately the 70-75% of dolphin remains show traces of burning, often reaching the calcination when the bones became white, whereas only the 30% of terrestrial mammal remains and the 50% of fish remains are burned. Overall, this pattern cannot be explained only by the waste disposal practices. In fact, we suggest that the high lipid content of dolphin skeletons, particularly concentrated in the skull and in caudal vertebra, so in the cervical and in caudal, may have facilitated their use as biofuel instead of wood in an area where the wood is scarce. Indeed, although caudal and cranial vertebrae are numerically fewer than other vertebrae in the vertebral column, they are generally the most frequently represented vertebra in the archaeological record. But we can move to the procurement strategies. We can propose, among the amount of different scenarios, 3 scenarios to explain the presence of dolphin at archaeological sites in Oman. We can assume that, particularly of larger animals, prehistoric communities may at times have collected and exploited stranded cetacean carcasses. Why not? Scenario number 2. Dolphins exploited at the site may have been victim of bycatch. For example, dolphins could have been accidentally trapped in non-selective nets, the use of which is attested by the numerous net sinkers recovered. However, according to Porcasi and Fujita, ethnographic studies show how prehistoric communities may have captured a large quantity of dolphins using primitive watercraft at the site with particular ecologic conditions, such as access to sandy beaches or lagoons. The location of Ras Al-Had and Ras Al-Jin sites was therefore ideal for these specialized activities called drive hunting. Drive hunting is a collective capture strategy in which dolphins are herded with boats into confined coastal setting where underwater noise produced by fishermen disrupt their echolocation and forced them into shallow water or mangrove swamp. Once there, they can be easily killed by the entire community of the village. Dolphin hunting was probably a cooperative activity involving multiple members of prehistoric communities with easy access to beaches or lagoons. In fact, Ras Al-Khaba, located in a high cliff overlooking the sea, provides a clear contrast. Despite the economy strongly based on marine resources, totally comparable to the other sites, no dolphin remains have been recovered there. Modern ecological data show that dolphins occur year-round along the Omani coast, but are particularly abundant between September-October and between April and May, in relation to the seasonal availability of small pelagic fish in near-shore and lagoon environments. This seasonal aggregation likely creates predictable windows of opportunity for dolphin exploitation in the past. As a future perspective, we plan to continue and complete the study of HD1 assemblages, which not only show the highest taxonomic variability, but also yielded the largest number of dolphin remains with butchering marks. In summary, dolphin exploitation along the Omani coast was closely shaped by coastal morphology and animal behavior. Sites with access to shallow waters and lagoons offered real opportunities for capture, while locations lacking these features show no evidence of exploitation. Dolphins appear to have been fully integrated into coastal fishing economies through a combination of opportunistic exploitation, bycatch, and possibly dive hunting. Taxonomic evidence indicates intentional processing, often directly on the site. This interpretation is further supported by anatomical distribution of skeletal elements, particularly at RJ3, where cranial elements are more frequent than the other sites, suggesting that entire carcasses were both directly on the site and here processed shortly after capture times. Finally, with the high species variability observed in some sites, for example HD1, reflect its strategic position. HD1 in particular is located between lagoons and deep water, making it a key site for the final phase of this project. I would like to thank all the people involved in this project and all the people in the Ministry of Heritage and Tourism. Thanks again for the invitation to me, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Elina. Thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you. Very interesting. Is there any question? Dr. Yahya? قطعني الناس ممكن تعطيه قطعني نعم
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm asking about the normally freshwater fish have gross rings on the vertebrae. I'm asking the dolphin also has the same gross rings on the vertebra or not?
Oh, can you repeat, please? Because your question is about the process.
Gross rings on the vertebra. Gross rings on the vertebra. Is it present in dolphin or not?
The cross ring? Oh, no, because the dolphins are mammals. No, sorry.
Thank you very much.
Just a simple question. Since you suggest this shape of catching dolphin on the beach, did you find any evidence in the bones of killing them,
No, but I can say that the majority of butchering marks are located in the cervical vertebra, so are abundant respect the rest. So it could be a possibility, but I have no idea. But I suppose that it's possible kill a dolphin like the Omani fishermen kill tuna with
yes, exactly.
hard hitting the head, and because it's difficult. But for example, Stenella, the smallest dolphin, is very short, so it's easy. It's like a tuna, the dimension of tuna, 1 meter, more or less. So it could be easy to catch. But I think that the nets is the main system that they use to collect dolphins, because they reach the shore, they reach the beaches alone, also without dry hunting, because sometimes we can see the dolphins from the beaches.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's really interesting. Maybe you said that, I didn't catch it. Did you find any differences in age across the sites? So maybe are there any signs of any preferential choice for different ages of these dolphins? I don't know if that's possible.
No, it's very difficult to understand this fact, because the unique element that testify the age of that dolphin is related to vertebral column, and the vertebral column take more time to complete the growth. So we can do nothing, because the teeth, for example, in dolphin are all equal, so we can consider just a few elements. And normally for the flipper bones, so humerus, radius and ulna, the level of growth is quite similar. So all adult could be, but the time is very large for the vertebral column, so we have no idea.
Thickness.
Thank you very much for the lecture. I have a question is, do you think the dominance of dolphins' bones, it's a natural force situation from the sea and location of the site, or it's a human management of what to select? Because such dominance either be selection by who is going to capture, or what the sea drive to your sites. Actually, in the sea, generally, we have this large movement of fishes, certain types in certain area. Do you think that driven selection is naturally coming to that area, or human really try to select this kind of yeah?
We can consider through the both possibilities, I think.
Good. Any more questions? Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Ilya. Thank you. Okay. We are at the end of this session. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the presenters very much for their interesting presentations. Now we're going to have a break, and kindly I ask the presenters of the next session to step up here to check on their presentation with Kimberly Williams here. Thank you very much.
Sir. Hi, everybody. We're going to start now, even though we're probably going to have a lot of people coming in a little bit later. I'm Kim Williams. I will be your MC for the day here. Our first speaker is Mathilde John. I'll have to keep reminding myself to speak toward the microphone. Please join me in welcoming Mathilde.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for attending this presentation, and many thanks to Sultan Qaboos University and the Ministry of Heritage and Tourism for hosting this beautiful event that we hope to have again soon. So I'm going to present the results of 4 years of research in the BCR region as a team effort. So I'm going to cite the results of the work done by many specialists that are part of our team, and I want to thank also all of our sponsors and collaborators. So the research project that I'm going to present started in 2021 in BCR, and we've explored the area on several axes. We had 3 main research questions that we wanted to tackle during this program. First, the objective was to understand the settlement patterns in this arid region from the perspective of the regional distribution of the settlements and sites, the layout and architecture of the first villages, and to question also the monumentality, community of ancient territories that seem to emerge, especially in the early Bronze Age. The second main research question regards technological innovation related to water catchment management and optimization of resources, also to the emergence of agriculture systems with the production of subsistence resources and the emergence of craft and especially pyrotechnologies such as pottery and metallurgy. The third main question we had is to understand the integration of these early Bronze Age sites, especially of Bisya region, in multi-scale networks to try to identify inter-site connections in the Oman Peninsula, but also the complementarity between the coast and the inland sites, and of course to retrace as well the overseas trade networks. So I will start with the results of the regional survey that we have conducted. We started by locating and mapping sites all over the area, also building up on previous research led by Birmingham University and Pisa University. And we benefit from a very good collaboration with the Bisya and Salut Visitor Center, with wonderful colleagues that also help us during the fieldwork, but also all year long in Bisya. So Bisya is a favorable area located on the course of two wadis, Wadi Saifam and Wadi Bahla. And we've focused on three main archaeological areas. Salut has mostly been investigated by the Italian team. We choose then to focus on the other area located east of Salut, which is Al-Dabi, and also some new data came from Fel further south. We have been doing some 3D modeling and landscape archaeology in the area to compare the implementation and architecture of the monuments that are supposed to be dated from the early Bronze Age. We have compared their implementation on hilltops or floodplains and their relations with the topography and hydrography. To do so, we have also documented all of those monuments with 3D modeling, photogrammetric plan and sections of the monuments. And we hope to continue this study to compare the actual sizes, plans, and architecture of all of these monuments. At the moment, we have about 13 monumental buildings in the Bisya region, so it makes it one of the densest areas for the early Bronze Age in central Oman. In Al-Dabi, I want to mention four main monumental buildings that we have been focusing on. Al-Dabi 2, you cannot see my pointer, here it is. Okay, Al-Dabi 2 to the north is the site that we have the most explored so far with surveys and excavations. It is located on a hilltop as well as Al-Dabi 3. And further south, the monumental building of AD1 is located in a floodplain and likely represents another type of settlement. The 3D modeling of the platforms highlighted very different settings and layouts, with some of them showing internal structures, such as in Al-Dabi 1, and some others using natural rock outcrops for extracting the rocks, but also to implement the building itself. The question of the function and the actual appearance of the platforms in the past still is a question of debate. Several hypotheses have been considered. In the case of Al-Dabi 2, which is located on a hilltop, the hypothesis of surveillance and possibly defense seems to be a good candidate to interpret at least part of the function of this building. The architecture was studied by Martin Sauvage. He identified different types of rocks that were used to build those monumental buildings in the Bisya region, and most of them are built with very large blocks of rocks that outcrop in the vicinity of the sites. The funerary landscape is also very dense and very rich in the Bisya region. Olivia Munoz led a project of survey in the area, and she documented several types of tombs in all of the area. She did also some remote sensing studies, and she could count over 3,000 cairn tombs in the BCI region, which is also a very high density of funerary monuments. The dating of those monuments is usually admitted as Hafid period tombs. However, she has been sampling some bones on some of the monuments, and she showed that they have been reused at least until the Iron Age and up to the pre-Islamic period. So the Arabian Cairn project is still going on, and she will provide further insights in the future on the question of the funerary landscape in Bisya. Regarding the archaeological excavations, we chose to focus on Al-Dabi 2, so this site located to the northeast of the Bisya region. This site was a good candidate to start investigating the Al-Dabi sector in the sense that it gathers several typical monuments, typical features, let's say, from the early Bronze Age. The main building is a circular monument that is built on the top of the hill, and it is so far one of the largest known in the Oman Peninsula because it measures 45 meters in diameter for the inner wall. It is associated with several tombs, cairn tombs, and a settlement area which is located to the southeast of the monumental building. We have conducted environmental studies in the area to try to reconstruct the paleoclimate and environmental conditions in the past, and some sections were investigated, especially with the analysis of snails, which are indicators of paleoclimate. And Tara Bezin-Waller, in cooperation with Katharina Schmidt, could identify different phases corresponding to different climates in the region, especially with a phase corresponding to the Holocene humid period, followed by a more arid phase corresponding likely to the early Bronze Age. They have also investigated the soils around the site with Dana pitch, and they could evidence possible soil anthropogenic soils, or at least soils that contain a high amount of organic matter, and that could be related to the early Bronze Age settlements. But we are still working on this and hope to present further results soon. For the archaeological area, we have now 16 radiocarbon dates that have been obtained at the site. And very interestingly, the most ancient building at the site is the monumental platform. Around 3000 BC, so in the Hafid period. This building is the first that has been constructed at the site, and afterwards we could only evidence scattered hearths and fireplaces all over the site, but no other construction. Most of it seems to be like hearths installed directly upon the bedrock. Then in the early and middle Umanar, we still see those evidences of scattered presence all over the site, but continuously, if not permanent. But the buildings of the settlement area themselves, the stone-lined buildings, all date to the late Umanar phase from 2200 to 2000 BC. And we couldn't evidence any later reoccupation at the site, which makes it also a very well-preserved early Bronze Age site. We have been excavating several areas at the site, in the tower, around the tower, and in the settlement area mostly. And the monumental building shows a foundation trench which has been dated. Here you can see the preservation of the wall and the foundation trench on the section below. The charcoal dated in this trench is the most ancient at the site, so 3000 BC. And the wall is preserved on about 2 meters high, and we have some collapsed stone around, but not much, meaning that we could reconstruct original height of the wall at about 3 meters maximum, and we couldn't evidence any trace of earthen elevation on top of this. We could evidence a possible entrance to the tower in the trench that we have excavated that could have been blocked in a second phase of occupation of the tower. You can see here this possible gate, And inside the monument itself, we have opened another trench to try to understand the functions and identify structures in the monument. As I said, most of the structures were hearths or fire pits, and they were dated from the early Umannar period. We had these large, you can see L212, these large structures are actually basin-shaped structures made of stones. And we were wondering if they could be natural or anthropogenic. Probably they're natural, but we think that they might have been reused by human occupation later on. We are not sure at all of the purpose of these structures, but if you have any comparison, we are very happy to discuss this, and we hope to find more in the future to better interpret this area. In the settlement area, we have mapped a dense concentration of domestic buildings. The earliest traces of occupation date back to 2800 BC, but the stone line buildings, as I said, are late Umannar, 2200 to 2000 BC. So we have excavated several places, and especially one house that has been excavated entirely, which shows a complex organization with the entrance to the south, a courtyard, and to the left, to the west of the building, several rooms that were accessible by a stone threshold, and where we found different evidences of domestic activities, such as grinding stones, and possibly heating or cooking structures, such as the pebble structure that you see at the bottom right. We could also evidence a kind of a drain in the corner of the house, likely to evacuate wastewaters from the building, showing a certain degree of planning and organization in this settlement area. We were especially interested in understanding the subsistence strategies of the societies, and as such, we were looking for evidence of food. What did they eat? And which type of fuel they used as well. And actually, we found quite a lot of evidences of palm tree remains. In this area, we mostly have evidence of wood and rootlets of palm tree that have been then grown close to the site and then used as a fuel. And in other area, I will show later, we have evidence of date consumptions as well. One building, quite small, was especially well preserved in the settlement area. This is the plan of the building, and it was preserved because of the destruction by fire of the building. And we could find very nice evidence of earthen architecture in it. Especially on the top right, you can see a fragment of roof that have been preserved and burned, and we could excavate, the wood elements that constituted the roof itself, and then the earthen materials that were installed on top of it. We also have the trace of a mud brick, which is quite small, about 7 per 14 centimeters. In this place, we could find extremely well-preserved organic remains because of the destruction by fire. We have an exceptional assemblage of 220 seed and fruits from date palm. It was a big surprise. You can see that we have different sizes, different shapes of date seeds. We hope to perform morphometric analysis in the future to identify the species and the domestication stage of those remains, and try to better understand the use of the palm tree in Bisya in the early Bronze Age. We also had some traces of cereals that were found in some hearths. About subsistence again, in the same context, we could find some evidence of fish. I started with the shark vertebra, and then the fish specialist, Anaïs Marast, she said, okay, now you have to sieve all the sediment in this context with a very fine sieve, and she was right, because actually we found about 600 fish vertebra, very tiny fish, like sardines, and this also testified to the great connection between the inland proto-oasis sites and the coastline, not only for ornaments, that is quite well known, shell rings, shell beads, but also for subsistence purposes. The funerary team, led by Olivier Munoz, excavated one of the tombs that lies on the west of the hill in Al-Dabi 2. It was this circular 4.5 meters large tomb, which contained about 80, the remains of 80 individuals, very fragmented, all collapsed, and many evidences of ornaments of different materials, steatite, carnelian, and different types of stones, and shell, of course. And the paleoanthropological study, led by Kaina Rouintru, shows very interesting results regarding the diet of the population that lived and were deposited in that tomb, lived at the site and were deposited in the tomb. Especially, she shows a lot of antemortem pathologies related to dental health. Caries, abscesses, and alveolar resorption shows that they used to consume a lot of carbohydrates from agricultural products, and it also correlates quite well with the findings of the vegetal remains in the settlement, so consumption of dates and other types of agricultural products. In terms of materials, most of the materials found at the site are pottery remains, domestic pottery, domestic ware, that is quite typical of the Umana period, middle and late Umana periods especially, with the typical shapes of open mouth jars and painted decorations. And we also have some Omani funerary pottery in the tomb, and evidences of imported wares, both in the settlement, from the Indus Valley, very likely, and in the funerary context as well, in the tomb from Eastern Iran, especially with the grey painted ware and incised grey wares. We would like now to discuss how to interpret this type of sites and how to understand this evidence for possibly early oasis lifestyles in Al-Dabi. To sum up, what do we have? In terms of settlement patterns, we have the evidence of increased occupation in the area, more than 3,000 tombs, a very high concentration of sites, and especially monumental sites, shows a demographic density in the area. The monumental sites of different sizes and different implementation locations in the landscape show organized communities and territories, and the presence of villages suggested perennial occupation, if not sedentary, but at least long-term at the same place. In terms of subsistence strategies, we have indication of early agriculture, at least with evidence of palm tree from 2800 and cereal from 2600 BC. The soils show the possibility to identify anthropogenic soils in the areas, in the surroundings of the sites. The presence of date stones in the buildings shows the storage of dates in the area, and dental pathologies, so that these projects were actually consumed by the populations.
Good.
In terms of technologies, we have evidence of pottery, domestic and funerary pottery, and of course, the very developed architectural remains show a high degree of specialization in architecture for the building of the stone monuments, and also for earthen architecture, as we have evidence of mud bricks and roof elements. Regarding, finally, the multi-scale connections of the site, we could evidence mostly cost relations with the coast for not only ornaments, but also subsistence, consumption of fish and sardine in Al-Dabi, and oversea relations with the Indus Valley and Eastern Iran in particular. We have very little evidence of relation with Mesopotamia, possibly one vessel, but not much. A bit more difficult is to evidence relations with inland sites between other sites located in the southern piedmont of the Hajar Mountains, probably because we need a deeper resolution, better resolution on the productions of each site to be able to recognize the difference between productions in the region. We are working on this, and we hope to, especially on the pottery, to have new results soon. What is still missing, though? We still miss the dating of several places in the area, several monumental sites. We are working on this, and it was actually the topic of our 2026 field mission. Irrigation systems are still missing as well in Al-Dabi 2. for understanding water catchment and management strategies, finding the structures, the ditches, the canals. Again, this has been the topic of our 2026 field mission, and we hope to present new results soon. And about the crafts, we don't have the workshops. We don't have the pottery workshops. We didn't find any evidence of copper metallurgy or even very little copper tools in the region. So we hope as well to complement this broad general picture in the future. And as I said, better understand inter-proto-oasis relations. I used this term of proto-oasis a couple of times because of course, it's not the fully developed oasis system, but we have some elements of it. It is partly evidence. It is obviously a progressive and non-linear development, which is not uniform and varies in scales and rhythm all over the region. We suggest that Al-Dabi too could be considered as one of those types of sites in the early Bronze Age, which would be specialized in agricultural production and domestic lifestyle. It probably works in association with other specialized sites, as Valentina Azara suggested earlier, and we need now to extend this integrated regional approach to better understand the early Bronze Age, not only sites, but clusters of occupations. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. Do we have any questions? Any questions from the audience?
Thank you. I just want to ask, you mentioned about some structure with mud bricks. I want to know if these are belonging to a certain late period or they are everywhere, they are in the site.
So the mud bricks were not easy to identify, to be honest. We have some evidences in the collapse of some of the walls in the settlement area, but the ones that were the most visible were in the collapse of the Fayed building. And they are all dated late Umayyad period, so 2200 to 2000, and they are quite small in terms of dimensions, like 15 centimeters by 7 centimeters.
Yeah.
But for earlier periods, we don't have evidence of it.
Yeah, but they are all underground, right? The mud bricks you were excavating, or they are exposed?
They were not exposed. They were not in situ. It was all in the collapse.
All in the
yes.
Collapse.
Yeah. Okay. Unfortunately.
Do we have another question?
Thank you very much, Mathilde, for this beautiful presentation. I have just a question about the pantry remains. Have you done a distinction between the wild pantries and the domesticated pantry?
Thank you very much. Well, actually, we are really waiting for this study to be implemented because it would be a very important insight. At the moment, we are building up a collaboration with Muriel Gros-Balthazar in France. She's a specialist in palm tree and palm tree domestication. And so she would perform morphometric analysis on the seeds to compare the shapes and sizes and try to identify the species and domestication stage. We would also like to try to do ancient DNA on some of the seeds to further understand this pattern. She has already found wild palm tree species in the Oman mountains recently. And so maybe we could gain insights on the possible local domestication of this plant in the early Bronze Age. But I don't have the answer now. Thank you.
One more question.
Thank you for the elegant presentation. My question, how you detect the abscess in the dental remains? How it look to know it is abscess?
Well, some pathologies leave traces on the bodies, and the bioanthropologists are trained to not only identify the bones, but also identify the pathologies. And for example, if I show you again, I don't know if I can get back to it. Anyway, this one, you can see the teeth on the bottom right has a big hole in it, and this is an evidence for carie. And same for the abscesses. You can see on the there was an infection, and then the teeth was lost before the person died, etc. And these are pathologies that are not known, for example, in Neolithic populations, because they have different types of dental wear. And so this is a typical evidence of agricultural consumption of agricultural projects that is well known, because they have comparisons at other sites, especially, for example, Olivia Minos, she worked in Bahla before on the early Bronze Age tombs, and she could evidence the exact same pattern in terms of dental health.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Jennifer Swarita. There I am. Okay. So good morning, everyone, and thank you to the organizers of the conference. So this morning, I'll be talking about archaeological palimpsests and the roles that they play in how we interpret multi-period archaeological sites in Oman. Closer. Closer. All right. Right. So many of you are already familiar with the UNESCO sister sites of Bat and El Khatum, which are best known for their early Bronze Age monuments. Together, they form part of a broad archaeological complex dispersed across the Wadi al-Hijr floodplain. The floodplain, its tributaries, and the surrounding hills. While archaeological remains are distributed across this landscape, the highest densities of material, towers, tombs, settlement structures, and associated artifacts are found on the hill peaks and slopes lining the Wadi Valley, including the Bat settlement slope, Al-Ahliya, and Al-Khatum settlement. These locations preserve dense palimpsests of domestic, monumental, and mortuary remains at or just below the ground surface. Rather than reflecting continuous occupation, they represent intermittent and repeated reuse from at least the late 4th millennium through the 1st millennium BC. Contexts with multi-period remains preserved at surface level are common in Oman, especially in and around the Hajar Mountains. As research in the region expands, it's useful to consider these sites through an explicit methodological and theoretical framework. Using recent research by the Bat Archaeological Project, or BAP, I'll contextualize the Bat and Khatum landscapes in terms of a cultural palimpsest spanning the Bronze and Iron Ages. My aim is to consider both the methodological challenges posed by these landscapes and the interpretive possibilities they offer, particularly for understanding how cultural landscapes were formed, experienced, and reimagined over long periods of time. The inner Piedmont of the Hajar Mountains descends from steep bedrock peaks into rolling foothills and valleys. Thin layers of cultural scree accumulate on the lower slopes, and alluvial sediments fill the valley floors. Across millennia, human populations chose to interact with locations that offered essential resources and aligned with their social logic. These interactions produce cultural landscapes composed of built and unbuilt spaces designed to support particular lifeways and social interactions. Once shaped, these landscapes both reflect and perpetuated cultural knowledge and practice. For archaeologists, cultural landscapes provide access to these ancient societies who once occupied them. In Oman, however, characteristics of both the natural and cultural landscapes increase the likelihood that archaeological sites will preserve in the form of a palimpsest. Palimpsests form when successive phases of human activity occur on the same surface or directly atop of earlier remains. Each phase interacts with, reuses, and partially obscures what came before it. In the Hajar Piedmont, resource-rich hilltops and slopes have attracted repeated use since the Paleolithic. These locations are visible, defensible, elevated above floods, and close to groundwater and agricultural lands. What they generally lack is the sediment accumulation necessary to create meaningful stratigraphic layers. Instead, phase after phase of cultural activities are performed on the same bedrock or scree surface with little or no taphonomic indication of the passage of time. This leaves archaeological remains from all periods preserved at or near surface level. In such contexts, changes in material culture traditions are often our primary means of reconstructing site histories.
Cultural palimpsests therefore pose many practical challenges, but they also offer interpretive opportunities that are rarely available at single period or deeply stratified sites. Across the Bot landscape, archaeological materials are densest on the hills bordering the northern edge of the Wadi al-Hijr, which you see here carving its way through the limestone hills. The green of the modern Bot oasis is in the southeast, and the whitish silty plain of Al-Khatum is in the northwest. I'll begin with two brief examples from Bot, from the settlement slope and Al-Akhliya, before turning to a more detailed discussion of the Al-Khatum settlement. The Bot settlement slope is a roughly 500-meter-long limestone hill at the northern edge of the floodplain, close to the modern oasis. It was first identified as a 3rd millennium BC site by Karen Freifeld in the 1970s, and more recently, BAP has carried out intensive survey and targeted excavations on various parts of the hill. Results show long-term and repeated reuse. Hafit-style tombs line the ridge. During the early Umayyad period, a tower and associated ditch and cistern features were constructed at the northwestern end of the hill. And beginning around 2500 BC, in the middle Umayyad period, rectilinear houses were built atop and around these features, gradually spreading along the hillside. Domestic activity continued through the late Umayyad period and to a lesser extent in the Wadi Suk period. During the Wadi Suk, the hill also became a stage for mortuary activity, including tombs built on the ridge, on top of the tower, and in abandoned houses. Check dams at the base of the hill extend into the Wadi and may relate to Umayyad period water management. Even in the best preserved areas, deposits are shallow, often only a few centimeters thick, and are frequently affected by erosion Large expanses of walling remain visible on the surface, creating a compressed and spatially dense palimpsest. Moving on to Al-Akhliya, the 300-meter-long hill lies just southeast of the settlement slope, also located along the northern edge of the wadi. Although the site has been known since 2012, there has been little research here due to its proximity to modern houses. This season, the Bot Archaeological Project was able to complete a systematic walking and mapping survey. Preliminary results indicate activity during the Umayyad and Wadi Suk periods. An Umayyad tower crowns the hill, along with 8 Umayyad-style tombs on the ridge. Additional large tombs of uncertain period are found on the ridge, the tower platform, and the slopes. Surface finds suggest Umayyad or Wadi Suk dates, with a small number of Iron Age II sherds indicating later visits or reuse. Here, the palimpsest is especially difficult to untangle. All features are built of the same local limestone, probably quarried from the Al-Akhliya hill itself, and there is virtually no sediment accumulation. This leaves architecture from different periods side by side on essentially the same surface. Yeah. The palimpsest at Al-Khatum settlement is simultaneously clearer and more confusing. The site is a 1 kilometer long limestone hill ridge located 3 kilometers downstream from the Bot oasis, with lower slopes coated by a shallow layer of scree. Its position offers reliable groundwater, flood protection, and access to easily traversable agripastoral lands. These are factors that made it attractive to repeated occupation. The site's archaeological record appears to reflect an intermittent occupation spanning segments of the Bronze and Iron Ages. The earliest identified features are a string of 20 feet tombs along the ridge associated with lithic scatters. At the western end of the hill, a tower platform and surrounding structures were built during the later Umayyad period and reoccupied and modified in the Wadi Suk period, as uncovered by the excavations of the University of Bologna. These contexts provide the richest Wadi Suk pottery assemblages known in the Bot region. On the hill's southwestern face, extensive rectilinear stone architecture is found across the middle and lower slope, of which BAP has mapped and surveyed a roughly 100 by 50 by 20 square meter area. Results of collected ceramics, unsurprisingly, show a high density of finds along the lower edge of the slope, as well as concentrations correlating with architectural features. Of the collected pottery assemblage, just over 3/4 are Umayyad, while a much smaller 22% belong to the Iron Age II and only 2% to the Wadi Suk period. Based on this data, our initial interpretation of the site was of an Umanar settlement associated with the Khutum Tower that was revisited and perhaps reoccupied in the Iron Age. But as we looked more closely, the picture became more complicated. We see Umanar pottery distributed fairly evenly across the survey area with a few hotspots. In contrast, Iron Age sherds, despite their lower density, are clearly concentrated in the northwestern half of the survey area. Test excavations aim to clarify the site's occupational history. At the eastern end of the settlement area, a series of trenches sampled an architectural complex with a floor plan similar to Umanar period houses excavated at Bot. All trenches reached the friable bedrock that was used as both floor and building foundation within 15 centimeters. Excavated ceramics are overwhelmingly Middle Umanar, with only 5 out of the 220 sherds dating to the Iron Age. A small building in the center of the survey area stood out due to its particularly high concentration of both Umanar and Iron Age sherds. Excavations here uncovered very shallow 10-centimeter deposits above bedrock. An Iron Age axe head and more pottery from both periods was found in the top 5 centimeters of the room fill. Below this, Umanar period sherds were found lying on the flat bedrock floor. While the preservation here is far from ideal, this pattern suggests that we have an Umanar building that was reoccupied in the Iron Age. Farther to the west, a fold in the underlying bedrock created a sediment trap, where a sounding identified 2 preserved cultural layers, the first associated with the neighboring walls and a modest collection of Iron Age pottery, and the second with a packed clay floor surface and a few nondescript Umanar sherds. This suggests that at least some, if not all, of the large walling at the western end of the survey area and beyond was built during the Iron Age. Finally, opportunistic survey identified 5 heavily eroded tombs at the western end of the hillside that we've tentatively dated to the Iron Age. So the cultural palimpsest at Batin al-Khutum speaks to the challenges for how to best document and characterize multi-phase sites preserved at surface level. Based on a cumulative palimpsest model, we expect each successive phase to obscure what came before. Only isolated spaces that happen to be untouched by later activity provide clear views into the site's early phases, such as the Hethite tombs along the crests of the settlement slope and Khutum Hills. Elsewhere, it can be difficult or even impossible to determine which phase a feature or activity belongs to. This pattern is apparent at the settlement slope, where excavation found only a few centimeters separating occupational phases, and deflation and erosion have further blurred the stratigraphy. Later domestic buildings atop the early Umanar Tower show how architectural reuse can wrongly suggest multiple histories as a single occupation. At Al-Athliya, this methodological problem is even more pronounced. Similar construction material, similar preservation, and minimal sediment accumulation make it extremely difficult to assign architectural features to specific phases. At Al-Khutum has notable exceptions to this. That found evidence of erosion damage in all test trenches, partially accounting for the disproportionate representation of certain periods. Taken at face value, Al-Khutum surface collection suggests that the site was an Umanar settlement with a small Iron Age II reoccupation. Only the chance preservation of localized stratified remains illuminate the scope and scale of the Iron Age activity. The preponderance of Umanar material culture at Al-Khutum echoes what we see at the settlement slope in Al-Athliya, where Umanar remains are both abundant and highly visible, while evidence for later reuse is comparatively sparse and ambiguous. This raises questions about whether certain periods, especially the early Bronze Age, are systematically overrepresented in surface assemblages, while others, such as the Hethite and the Wadi Souk, are more subtle and easily overlooked. Questions therefore remain concerning the material cultural patterns in the Al-Khutum settlement palimpsest in particular. Why is the Iron Age so underrepresented in the surface remains? Even taking into account potentially disproportionate impacts of erosion or a smaller overall occupied area, the proportion of Iron Age to Umanar pottery is perplexingly low. Conversely, why is the Umanar period so overrepresented in the surface remains, even where the stratigraphic layers interrupt the palimpsest and surrounding architecture dates to the Iron Age? Finally, how should we account for the near total absence of Wadi Souk period pottery, given the substantial Wadi Souk presence found at the Khutum Tower? While taphonomic processes may account for some of these disparities, cultural activities are likely contributing factors. So we've established that palimpsests can be difficult to disentangle, but they also offer opportunities to consider how and why past peoples engaged with a layered history of the landscape. A cultural palimpsest is not just an archaeological phenomenon, but also a lived landscape where ancient features remained visible, tangible, and meaningful to later communities. At Bat, this is particularly evident at the settlement slope in Al Ahliya, where towers, tombs, and domestic architecture from earlier phases remained prominent features in the landscape long after their original use had ended. Each successive community therefore interacted not only with the natural environment, but also with an inherited built environment that shaped movement, visibility, and perceptions of place. In the archaeology of Oman, there is a well-established pattern of human groups returning to sites and landscapes abandoned decades or centuries earlier, perhaps best demonstrated in the Iron Age reoccupation of the Bronze Age landscape at Salut. The Bat landscape fits neatly within this pattern. At the settlement slope, Wadi period tombs were inserted into and on top of earlier domestic and monumental architecture. At Al Ahliya, later activity clusters around existing Umanar towers and along the hill ridge already lined with tombs. In both cases, earlier structures appear to have acted as focal points around which new practices were organized. The similar dynamic is evident at Al-Khutam, where Iron Age fortifications and tombs were constructed on the slope closest to the prominent Umanar tower at the western end of the hill. While logistical advantages such as defensibility, water access, and proximity to agropastoral lands clearly influenced this choice, it is also likely that the cultural value was attached to the site's prominent and already ancient architecture. The tower and its associated features may have functioned as anchors of memory, authority, or ancestral presence that resonated with Iron Age social logic. Taken together, Bat and Al-Khutam suggest that palimpsests were not simply the byproduct of repeated occupation, but active components in how landscape was experienced and understood. Rather than viewing palimpsests as obstacles to interpretation, we can approach them as records of long-term relationships between people, place, and memory, allowing us to explore not only when and where people lived, but how they perceived and engaged with the material traces of those who came before them. To close, I'll emphasize that an awareness of palimpsests and their potentially uneven impact on a site's archaeological record and their prevalence in Oman can help us to develop a more balanced approaches to documenting and interpreting the region's past. At the same time, palimpsests invite us to move beyond questions of chronology and to consider how ancient people experienced landscapes that were already layered with material traces of earlier generations. Across Bat and Al-Khutam, later communities repeatedly chose to build among, on top of, and alongside earlier towers, tombs, and settlements. These choices suggest that earlier remains were active elements in shaping perceptions of place, memory, and belonging. Approaching the Bat and Al-Khutam landscapes as long-term cultural palimpsests allows us to explore continuity and change not only in the material culture, but in ways of inhabiting, valuing, and reimagining place. While such landscapes are difficult to disentangle archaeologically, they offer interpretive possibilities that are rarely available at stratified or single-period sites. It's precisely their messy, layered, and compressed character that gives us access to the deep histories of human engagement with the terrain. And I would like to thank all of my many collaborators who helped me to put together this narrative, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Anyone have any questions? Your questions? Because you were so perfectly clear. Thank you. Happy to escape. Our next speaker is actually going to join us via Zoom. So if you give us a minute, we will connect with Steffi Dupper.
Susan, I'll take you to me. Secure the screen. Keep. Go. A business need to nurse. Can't take it to age to. And Zoom شغال شباب. Just suitable.
Everybody, thank you for your patience.
What's the good? Yes.
Okay. Hi, Steffi. Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi, Steffi. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Welcome. Welcome. I'm going to, can you control the presentation from where you are? You want to share your screen?
I'm going to share my screen, yes.
Okay. All right.
Should be in full screen now.
You are in full screen now. Okay, go ahead. Please start. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello to everyone. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present my research at the 50th anniversary conference of the Journal of Oman Studies on the archaeology of the Oman Peninsula. Unfortunately, I cannot be with you in Muscat today as term is still ongoing in Germany and I have still teaching obligations. So I'm very grateful for the organizing committee to making it possible for me to present online. Today, I want to talk about some recent and some a little less recent discoveries from the Umana period in the Al-Mudaibi region. So we stay in the chronological framework of the early Bronze Age as you had it in the previous presentations. So we're in the time about 2700 to 2000 BCE. The area that I'm wanting to talk about today is in northern central Oman, as you can see here on the map, the rectangle in blue. It is in the Shakir North Governorate in the Vilayat Al-Mudaibi. So you can see here on the map the most important Umana period sites of the region with their different kinds of structures. As you can see in the legend of the map, they're rectilinear architecture, so domestic structures, their tombs and their towns. You see some different color codes. So all that is in grey is something I will not be talking about today. So I will be not talking about Al-Muyassir, where the German Mining Museum had done extensive work in the 1980s, which is a very important site, especially with regard to copper production. And it has areas with rectilinear architecture. It has 2 of those so-called towers and several tombs. I will also be not talking about Al-Khashbar, which might be a little more important for the Hafid period than for the Umana period. Again, we have little rectilinear architecture, we have several towers, we have several tombs, but I thought this is a site I've been talking about a lot in the past, so I will skip it for today's presentation. I will also not talking about Sinau, where several Umana period tombs have been excavated in various rescue excavation conducted by the Ministry of Heritage and Tourism related to the ongoing developments of the city of Sinau. So what I will be talking about are the other sites that you can see here on the map. So this is Mahtra, Al-Kabrain, Sharik and Al-Musalla. These are the places where we have been working in the past years, and I will give you an overview of the results of the work that we did there. So let's start with Mahtra. Mahtra is only roughly 3 kilometers west of Al-Khashbar on the other side of the Wadi Andam, as you can see here on the map. It depends a little on how you count, so it's 2.7 kilometers to the closest archaeological structure, but that would be then Hafid period, and it's 3.5 kilometers to the closest known Umana building, which is a tower. Today, the site of Mahtra is just south of the modern village, as you can see here on the map. In 2019, we conducted an archaeological survey there as part of the wider Al-Mudaibi regional survey, and we found many Wadi Suk period single subterranean tombs. As you can see here on the map, all the blue dots are Wadi Suk period tombs, and it's all in the vicinity of the modern soccer field that you can also see here on the map. These are all individual tombs with oval or rectangular subterranean burial chambers and 1 or more above-ground stone walls that sort of mark the tomb above ground. This is what you can see in the picture on the lower right. But what we also found during the survey and sort of in the vicinity of all these Wadi Suk period tombs was large quantities of Umana pottery. So we selected a smaller area for a more intensive pedestrian survey that you can see here also on the map. And we found lots and lots of Umana pottery sherds on the surface, all the red dots indicated in the map. We also saw that some walls were already visible from the surface, so we had evidence for Umana period rectilinear architecture. We decided to conduct some small excavations there. We investigated in 2 trenches, one of them you can see here on the slide, which is results, and they confirmed our dating that we had already from the pottery by radiocarbon dates that fall between 2400 and 2200 BCE. These radiocarbon dates come from 2 small fireplaces next to the stone walls of the structures. So in the picture on the lower right, you can see one of those fireplaces, and the other images show you some of the stone walls that we excavated. So clearly we have rectilinear architecture at the site, and based on what we can see already from aerial photographs, it covers a quite big area. So this stands in stark contrast to the nearby Al-Khashba. There we only have very, very limited remains of rectilinear architecture that are known to us. But on the other hand, there in Al-Khashba, we have many monumental towers. We have several Umana tombs, including one with wide-facing stones, so a very elaborate type of Umana tombs. While at Mukhtra, in the survey that we conducted, we couldn't find any tower or any Umana period tombs. So we have a question, why are there no towers and tombs in Mukhtra, and why so little rectilinear architecture at Al-Khashba? This could be, of course, an artifact of discovery or preservation. There's modern construction ongoing. Maybe we just missed things in the survey. But this is something that you should keep in mind and that I will come back to later. First, let us have a look at one of the other sites that we investigated. This is Al-Kabrain. Originally, the site was surveyed by Irene Bieseveld and her team during the Lost Cities project that focused on abundant mud brick settlements, include late Islamic mud brick architecture as the 4 that you can see here on the slide. One day, she came back from the field and she told us she found a rather odd shirt that doesn't really fit into her late Islamic collection that she usually had, and this was because the shirt was of an Umana period date. So this shirt came from a shallow mound that is sort of within the late Islamic field systems, as you can see here on the slide. And we decided to have a closer look at it, and then also did some excavations here in 2022. On the surface of the mound, you could already see parts of the ring wall preserved, and we decided to have a little excavation at the eastern part of this mound. The excavation revealed substantial mud brick and stone constructions, which we would tentatively interpret as a mud brick tower dating to the Umana period. The interpretation as a tower is less certain than the date, because for the dating we have, beside Umana pottery sherds, also radiocarbon dates from the mud brick layers of this structure. The outer edge of the building has been affected by the later Islamic field system that sort of cut away parts of the structure, and as you can see here in the section. As Irene did an intensive survey in the region, we're also quite sure about other structures in the vicinity, and again, we have only part of the full picture preserved, so we have only this tower, we have no evidence for tombs, and we have no evidence for rectilinear architecture. Again, this could be an artifact of discovery, especially as in late Islamic times, there were a lot of other ongoing activities there that might have destroyed earlier use. Let's have a brief look at the third site that I want to present today, which is Sharik. This has been discovered during our 2021 season of the Al-Mudaibi Regional Survey. So it's again a circular structure built of stones, which is today preserved at the low mount in the landscape. We did no excavation there, so we have no radiocarbon dating for this site. The surface pottery of the mount itself is very limited. We mainly had early Iron Age and early Islamic pottery sherds, but we had also a handful of Umayyad period sherds. One example you can see here on the slide. And the walls, or the external ring wall of the tower, was visible at some parts of the mount. So again, we think we have here a potential Umayyad period tower available, but since we did not excavate it, this also has to remain with a small question mark. On firmer grounds, we are again when it comes to Al Musalla. Here in Al Musalla, we did the rescue excavation in 2024 and a survey connected to this rescue excavation in 2025. We got informed by the Ministry of Heritage and Tourism that during the construction of a water pipe for the village, an early Bronze Age tomb was affected by the construction work. So we afterwards conducted rescue excavation of this tomb. Here you can see the tomb in its sort of final stage of excavation. You can also see the cut that went through the tomb for the water pipe, which was excavated with the JCB. So parts of the tombs were already destroyed when we started excavation, but there were other parts where it could still work in. Approximately 1/3 of the tomb is today below a modern cemetery. So we did not excavate that part, only the parts that are below today's modern road system, where also the water pipe was planned to be built. Now they redirected it, now it is built somewhere else, but it was still better to have the tomb fully excavated, since it was already partially excavated by the JCBs. You can see that the tomb has 3 chambers, labeled here as A, B, and C, and it has an external diameter of approximately 7 meters, so it's not one of the biggest Umayyad tombs that are there. What is a little more special about the tomb is that it has 2 levels, an upper and a lower story. The lower level reaches approximately 60 centimeters below ground, and then this level was covered by big stone slabs, labeled here with the number 2, where you can see them. And then there would have been an upper chamber, but virtually nothing of this was preserved because it was on modern day ground level and the area was used as a dirt road, so it was driven over for the past years. 2-story tombs are not uncommon, not unique, but are also not very common in the Umayyad period. We do have other examples. They exist also on Umayyad Island, they exist in Hili, in Shimmer, in Ras Al Jins, and in Al Muyassir. So it is something that seems to be widespread, but only occasionally being used. We had a quite nice collection of finds from the tomb, which are typical Umayyad period pottery, softstone, and calcite vessels. Compared to other Umayyad period tombs, we had quite a few Umayyad period pottery sherds. We have a complete absence of Iranian greywares, which could be an indicator for a later chronology. So maybe but it could also be that because we're pretty far inland and because we have a very small pottery collection. The softstone vessel that you can see here on the slide fit neatly into the standard repertoire of Umayyad period softstone shapes, and we have, as it's also very common for other tombs, a mismatch between lids and vessels. So most of our lids don't fit the vessels that we have, and vice versa. Additionally to all that, we also have a large collection of beads. We have beads made of carnelian, of chalcosteatite and steatite, of frit or paste, of copper or bronze, and of conus shell. In total, we had 124 beads. You can see them here on the slide arranged in modern arrangements just to make them look nice. Most of them were just found distributed with no connection to each other throughout the filling of the tombs. Some were found so close together that we assume they belonged to the same piece of jewelry in the past. In addition to that, we have some copper rings and some shell rings and some copper pins that were found in the tomb. The human remains were highly fragmented. And most of them come from the JCB excavations, so they were even more fragmented through that again. And they are currently studied by Olivia Monod, Kaina Reutu, and Lisa Gagnard within the framework of the Arabian Cairns project led by Olivia Monod. We already submitted some bones for radiocarbon dating on bioapatite, but we're still waiting for the results. So hopefully another time I can tell you more about this. So when we had this excavation, we were thinking that there should be other Umayyad period tombs around, because usually Umayyad period tombs come sort of in groups and not as single tombs. So we did a survey on aerial photography and on satellite images, and we found out that especially the aerial photography from the National Survey Authority of Oman from 1968 was really helpful, because it showed us the village mainly unaffected by modern constructions and still with good visibility of tombs. In addition to that, we looked at modern satellite images that have a better resolution, but then have the problem that much of the tombs are overbuilt today by modern development. So what we did, we mapped all the tombs and we tried to visit them and to see what of the tombs are still available. So then this resulted in the map that you can see on the left side here. Most of the tombs already disappeared through below modern construction, especially those tombs on the west part of the village, while those in the south are much better preserved. Still, it gives us a good overview of how many tombs have been there in the past. And thinking that we have so many tombs, we were thinking that there might be also other Umayyad period structures in the area, so we decided to conduct a pedestrian survey in a radial pattern. So we started always from the center of the modern village, so next to the mosque there, and then walked outwards in these radial patterns to see if we have any hints for other Umayyad structures that would be there. And in the end, on 2 transects of what we walked, you can see here the complete results. So the big red dots are the tombs, and then all the green dots are late Islamic finds, and all the red and orange dots are Umayyad periods finds. You have here a close-up of one part, because in 2 of the transects we found some Umayyad period pottery sherds and wanted to have a better look at that distribution. So we decided to have a more intensive survey here, to walk at closer space to get a better resolution of the findings. Again, color code is the same. Green is late Islamic and reddish colors are Umayyad period. So this is now a close-up with only the Umayyad period's finds, and you can see from the slide that we had pottery that is not typical for tombs, so we could assume that we have domestic pottery here. And we also found one piece of technical ceramics that is used in metal production, which is also something you not expect to find at tombs. So we were thinking of having here, let's call it a settlement in the widest sense of the term, because we didn't find any permanent structures, no walls, no buildings, but just an area with Umayyad period pottery scattered. So we could also call it a campsite. But maybe it has also something to do that we're very close to the modern buildings, so maybe it's just not longer preserved. And with this overview, I want to come to sort of a conclusion for the whole region during the Umayyad period. The overview of sites demonstrated the diversity and complexity of Umayyad activity that we have in the region. We have sites with very different settings of which types of structures are present. We have collective tombs, monumental towers, and rectilinear architecture. We have some more ephemeral traces of occupation, and they all come together in different combinations. So we have some sites where we have only tombs. We have some sites where we have rectilinear architecture. We have some sites where we have only towers, and we have sites with combination of all of them in different degrees. What you can also see here on the map on the right is indication of the area that can be reached within a 2 hours walking distance. So the starting point of that is then always a tower or a site with rectilinear architecture. In case of Al Musalla, we took the pottery cluster starting point. And you can see that there is lots of overlap between the regions. So that indicates a shared use of space and resources between those sites. So what we can see here is that in the Al Mudaibi region, during the Umanah period, we have a network of sites that were used by what Bernberg refers to as multi-sited communities. So these societies utilized several places at different times for different purposes, exploiting different resources and carrying out various activities at those sites. Consequently, these communities are characterized by diverse forms and practices of mobility and sedentarism, as well as subsistence. So these include temporary hunting and herding camps, areas used for craft production, agricultural areas, and elaborate cemeteries, among many other places. So this just shows how complex the interaction between the different sites was in the Umanah period. This is not sort of a fixed idea and something that is complete, but just something to give you an idea, to think about how people and sites could have interacted in the past. And I hope that my presentation has given you some new ideas for the ongoing debates on settlement system, permanence, and location choices during the Umanah period. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Steffi. Do we have any questions from the audience? Unmute. Thank you. Thank you, Steffi. Do we have any questions from the audience? No question? Oh, one question here. If you can shout it to me, I can say it into the microphone. If you can shout it to me, I will say it into the microphone.
And prayer before the Lord because son of God, he says you are in among the attendants. And if he is way to always person dying there, his hand is stuff.
We have a question from the audience, Steffi. If you have any work priorities for the site, because some of the features are between buildings and over in the next few years will be destroyed. Do you have any priority areas that you'd like to examine?
I hope I understood the question correctly. The question is about priority areas?
Priority areas, because some of the features are between buildings, and the worry is that further construction might destroy those important features. Are there any that hold more important to get to?
Yeah, so this is why we decided to conduct the survey in Al Musalla, because it was clear that there must be more structures around that sort of need to be aware for, so that you can plan future construction work. So this is why in the area of Al Musalla, we provided the Ministry of Heritage and Tourism with information about where sites are so that they can be incorporated in further development plans. So this is what we mainly do. So we provide information to make sure that everybody is aware of the archaeology there, but it's simply too much that you could excavate it all. It has to be very targeted if there is some construction plan somewhere.
Thank you for that answer. Do we have any other questions from the audience? All right. Thank you so much, Steffi. I'm sorry you're not here. It would be great to see you in person, but I understand. So thank you, and thank you for this extra effort. Take care.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. And the date to you. So our next guest is Dennis Frenez. This is where we learn to pronounce each other's names at conferences. So Dennis Frenez.
Good morning, everyone. Before beginning the presentation, I would like to thank the Ministry of Heritage and Tourism and the National Museum of Oman for granting permission to study the indus-related objects discovered in the Sultanate, as well as all the teams who originally found them. A special thank is due to Jonathan Markenoyer and Sophie Marie, with whom I collaborated in producing much of the analytical data that form the basis of this presentation. Today, I address early Bronze Age long-distance interaction not as a simple movement of commodities, but as a dynamic process of circulation of objects, people, technical knowledge, and social practices. Interaction in this sense is never unidirectional, but involves a continuous cycle of negotiation, adaptation, and return. Drawing on the interface between the Indus region and the Oman Peninsula, I will explore how these processes operated and why they matter for understanding third millennium connectivity. The Indus civilization, or Harappan culture, represent one of the major urban traditions of the early Bronze Age, flourishing between 2600 and 2900 BC within a highly standardized yet internally diverse urban system. Remarkably, Indus cities combine substantial infrastructure investment with a striking absence of royal tombs and explicit representation of ruling elites. Authority appears to have been distributed across multiple coexisting institutions, pointing to a hierarchical organization rather than a centralized state model. Within this framework, specialized craft tradition and a writing system primarily for administration developed in close association with long-distance exchange. To understand these external relations, the Indus-Arabian connection must be situated within the broader Middle Asian interaction sphere, linking the Indus Valley with Iran, Mesopotamia, Central Asia, and the Oman Peninsula. Within this space, maritime overland routes enable the circulation of commodities, technical knowledge, and shared practices. It was precisely this high degree of institutional coherence that allowed the Indus system to sustain structured interaction across such vast distances. External exchange was an integral pillar of the Harappan economy, managed via shared administrative tools. This network indicates a structured system rather than episodic contact. A crucial step in understanding this interaction is recognizing the movement of craftspeople, not only finished objects. Technological analysis of carnelian beads from Mesopotamia, for example, demonstrated that distinct Indus technology can be identified while beyond the Indus Valley. In several cases, these signatures occur on local style materials, indicating that production itself was relocated. This provides clear evidence that skilled Indus craftspeople and their technical knowledge moved across regions during the second half of the third millennium BC. Comparable mechanisms are visible in different regions linked with Indus external trade. In Central Asia, for example, artifacts made from Asian elephant ivory were produced locally using Indus-derived technological knowledge. This evidence shows that itinerant craftspeople rework non-local materials according to the local demand, confirming that technological relocation and re-embedding were recurrent features of long-distance interaction. This mobility of craftspeople generated hybrid material forms shaped through active cultural negotiation. Objects combining Indus technological tradition with local stylistic choices demonstrate that interaction did not only involve passive reception, but the selective reworking of external knowledge within locally meaningful social frameworks. Long-distance exchange in the Indus world was governed through an administrative system designed to regulate identification, control, and accountability across distance. While external trade initially used standard Indus seals, the system was progressively reconfigured with new categories of seals explicitly adapted to foreign administrative environments. This hybridization took various forms. In some regions, for example, writing was adapted for seals to function within local bureaucratic system, as seen in these Indus-style seals bearing inscription in Sumero-Akkadian cuneiform and linear Elamite. In other contexts, seals retain the Indus script while adopting local seal morphologies and translating iconography into regional visual languages. A significant systemic shift occurred around 2300 BCE, with the sudden appearance of Indus-style round stem seals bearing the motif of the Indian bison. This seal type was clearly designed for external trade. Remarkably, the Indian bison, or short-horned bull, characterizes over 65% of Indus-related seals found outside the Indus Valley, but only 4% within it, suggesting that it was the symbol of Indus individual acting specifically in external trade. These seals were manufactured locally according to shared Indus conventions, forming consistent regional groups. Alongside seal, standardized weights introduced quantification into external trade, showing direct metrological equivalence with other local weight systems. Together, these tools reveal a decentralized yet rule-based system of governance, allowing exchange to operate across culturally diverse regions. In this framework, the Oman Peninsula, known as the Land of Magan in the cuneiform text of the later millennium, offers an exceptional empirical setting in which to test how this system of Indus external trade operated in practice. Here, interaction can be examined at multiple levels, allowing locally produced materials to be distinguished from imports through technological, compositional, and stylistic analysis. Oman therefore functioned not simply as a recipient region, but as a laboratory in which the mechanism of circulation, adaptation, and governance can be observed in concrete archaeological forms. Archaeological research across the Oman Peninsula has revealed a dense, coherent assemblage of Indus-related material culture, including pottery, metal tools, stone and ivory ornaments, but also seals and weights. Rather than occasional imports, these objects form structured groups associated with production, administration, and daily use, pointing to sustained interaction. This pattern is especially clear in the ceramic record, dominated by diagnostic forms like the large black storage jars, decorated jars, perforated jars, pedestal dishes, and cooking pots. These vessels occur at both coastal and inland sites. Most striking is their abundance. At some sites, approximately 70% of ceramic assemblage is Indus-related, a frequency with no parallels in other regions of Western and Central Asia, where Indus pottery is virtually absent. This anomaly is best explained at a systemic level. Exchange with the Oman Peninsula likely involved large quantities of staple commodities. However, this explanation does not fully account for the entire evidence. In fact, geochemical and technological analysis demonstrated that, in addition to imports, many of the ceramic types discovered in Oman were made from local claywares using distinctive Indus-shaping techniques. This vessel was not merely visually copied, but represented embodied technical gestures and firing routines transmitted through apprenticeship. Their consistent discovery points to the sustained presence in Oman of potters trained within the Indus tradition. The record thus documents not imitation, but the movement of skills and specialized craftspersons among these trade networks. A revealing case is provided by the so-called Indus bottles, a small group of carinated vessels with black-painted Indus-style motif found in Omanar funerary contexts, which show no parallels within the Indus Valley. Although their unusual morphology once suggested local imitation, provenance analysis showed that they were manufactured in the lower Sindh. Unlike the pottery discussed earlier, these were not produced in Oman, but were deliberately conceived and exported from the Indus Valley for the local market. Their presence documents a proactive, market-oriented production based on the anticipation of foreign demand. Once Indus ceramic technology were shown to operate locally, pottery could no longer be treated as an isolated case. Excavation at sites like Salut, Bat, and Dahua reveal assemblages where industry-related objects occur alongside local production across several material categories. This allows us to examine interaction as a cross-sectoral process, showing how industry material culture became deeply embedded within domestic, productive, and funerary practices. Salud provides particularly clear evidence for the social dimension of the Indus presence in Oman. Alongside trade materials, the site yielded Indus-style objects linked to play, domestic routine, and everyday interaction. Their presence showed that Indus material culture extended into the sphere of daily life, indicated a sustained engagement and the reproduction of familiar practices. This points to the presence of people and households rather than transition trading episodes. Sites in Oman also reveal objects linked to the administrative management of exchange. Indus seals bearing the Indian bison, the emblem of external trade, have been found across the peninsula. Many were produced locally using local stones or metal, yet carved according to Indus conventions, indicating controlled reproduction within a shared framework. This institutional dimension is explicit at ST1, where in addition to the discovery of an Indus seal exceptionally made from local chlorite, a local jar preserved impression of an Indus inscribed tablet stamped at least twice, before its firing. The vessel is local, but the motif and the writing derived from Indus practice, showing that identification devices were integrated into the local production. This provides evidence for an operational interface, marking a transition from exchange to institutional coordination. Among the most significant finds from Oman is a silver ring from Dahua, bearing the image of an Indus-style Indian bison, as we say, the emblem of Indus Harappan involved in external trade. Its importance derived from the deliberate combination of elements. While the ring's forms follows regional Mesopotamian traditions, its iconography remains unequivocally Indus. Furthermore, analysis revealed that the silver likely originated from Anatolia rather than Arabia or South Asia. Shape, iconography, and material thus converge in a negotiated material expression, in which Indus symbols were embedded within forms harmonizing supra-regional, quasi-global cultural expressions, offering a clear synthesis of how cross-cultural interaction operated through the selective recomposition of meanings. On the basis of the evidence discussed so far, Indus external trade can be analytically deconstructed into a coherent set of features grounded into closely interrelated domains. The administrative management was characterized by standardized administrative tools, such as seals, weights, and metrological systems shared across regions, by the distribution of a rule-based system of control enabling accountability across distances, by emblematic iconographies signaling trade function abroad, and by the adaptation of Indus identification devices to foreign administrative environments. The marketing strategy is defined by the tailoring of objects to local consumption practices, by the deliberate design of commodities for specific regional markets, by the anticipation of foreign demand, by the selective deployment of locally intelligible forms and symbols, and by the systematic production of negotiated hybrid forms as a strategic outcomes rather than incidental byproducts. The production and technological organization is marked by the mobility of craftspeople rather than the mere circulation of finished goods, and by the relocation of production through the use of local raw materials combined with Indus technical traditions. Taken together, these features indicate the deliberate implementation of a supraregional marketing strategy driven by a prototypical globalizing vision. Within this theoretical framework, concepts drawn from social sciences can be employed as a heuristic tool to describe the foundational features of a Bronze Age marketing system rather than its detailed operational mechanism. In this context, the concepts of globalization and localization are especially relevant, as they allow us to describe the structural dynamics through which economic systems maintain coherence across distance. In simple terms, globalization generates and maintains standardization as services and products expand beyond domestic markets. Instead, localization adapts services and products to the taste and practices of foreign markets, either proactively or through the creation of local subsidiaries. So, globalizing dynamics therefore create structural coherence across distant regions, enable shared standards and practices, and reduce the isolation of the local systems. On the other hand, globalization maintains and intensifies local variations, produce hybrid outcomes rather than universal replicas, and negotiate cross-cultural interaction between economics and socio-technical players. When the key features of industry external trade are assessed in relation to the foundational characteristic of globalizing and localizing dynamics, a clear pattern emerges. Services and administration management of industry external trade are structured according to a strongly globalizing logic designed to ensure procedural coherence, accountability, and interoperability across supraregional networks, even though their concrete application could be locally translated or hybridized. By contrast, marketing strategy is clearly localized as languages or foreign markets, as services and commodities were deliberately adapted to the taste, practices, and symbolic languages of foreign markets, often through the production of negotiated hybrid forms. This configuration is further reinforced by the organization of cross-production linked to external trade, which acted as a practical interface between standardized procedures and locally embedded practices. To summarize, evidence from the Oman Peninsula contributes to revealing an external trade system structured around globally standardized administrative practices, strongly localized marketing strategies, and a flexible organization of production that mediated between these two dimensions. This configuration allowed the industry system to operate coherently across supraregional networks while remaining responsive to local markets, practices, and constraints, resulting in durable and negotiated forms of interaction rather than episodic exchange. To conclude, I would like to return on the title of this presentation, and in particular to the question marks that close the title. The evidence discussed today clearly demonstrates that interactions between the Indus region and the Oman Peninsula was not limited to the circulation of commodities, but involved the movement of skills, technology, and administrative practices into southeastern Arabia. Archaeological data suggest the existence of stable, locally embedded operational hubs, enduring interfaces between Indus system and the regional market that go well beyond the model of itinerant merchants or episodic craft mobility, and then may be described in modern heuristic terms as functional equivalent to modern foreign subsidiaries. What remains fundamentally unresolved, however, is the extent to which these movements also implemented durable social return, integration, or reproduction in the opposite direction. Whether individuals or groups remained embedded with local communities over multiple generations, whether such presence involved intermarriage and cultural hybridization or long-term settlements, or whether they ultimately result in son or return, this cannot yet be demonstrated archaeologically. The absence of evidence of culturally segregated enclaves nevertheless points toward negotiated and integrated forms of coexistence rather than asymmetrical and extractive interaction. In this sense, the question mark at the end of the title is not just a rhetorical flourish, but an opening into an array of possibilities and a deeply complex social landscape. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dennis. That's really outstanding. Thank you for your presentation. Any questions from the audience?
Thank you. Thank you a lot. I don't know if you could try to fit the evidence that we have.
Can you speak a little bit loud?
If you had to fit the evidence that we have at this stage in one of the socioeconomic models that you presented, do you think that would be possible, or would we need more or different evidence, or do you envisage rather a mixed model on something that it's a bit in between all the different scenarios?
According to the evidence that we have at the moment, in my opinion, it's a mixed model, where, as I said, this is probably because for some reason that the process didn't complete, possibly, or because this was more implemented from a single player than as a systemic model. So apparently they were trying to implement this model of interactions using globalizing models, but to adapting them in the material expression to the local traditions. So there is an attempt to standardize the way of exchange, the modes of exchange, but adapting them strongly to the local taste, needs, and also, in some cases, operational system. So I don't know if I reply your question. Yeah.
Any other questions? I'll ask a question if there's no one else. Do you have any hypotheses about, how do I put this, how far interior this sort of model might be testable? Does that make sense? Are you thinking, so you mentioned Dahua, obviously on the coast. Have you thought about how far across the Oman Peninsula these models might be testable? So is there a diminishing signature?
No. For example, the strongest evidence we have so far, is from Salut. Both quantitatively and qualitatively, because of the types and of materials, this is where our hypothesis generated somewhere. My impression is that it's not a matter of distance from the coast, for example, even because, in my opinion, in third millennium terms, Dahua is not a coastal site. And but control or interaction to the political, social, economic entities that control specific resources and also possibly routes. We're not able to test this hypothesis yet, but we have promising situations, comparable situation also at Konar Sandal South, for example, in Iran. And they both point toward the negotiation for copper, acquisition of copper, for example. We have Indus materials linked with, also in Konar Sandal, to copper processing and copper working. So, and this will fit the model also for the need of controlling crossroads and strategic raw materials.
Thank you. Anyone else think of a question?
Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to start again with the first afternoon session dedicated to early Bronze Age again in Oman. And we have the pleasure to listen first to Professor Khaled Douglas.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Okay, so Good. Actually, this presentation is jointly with my colleagues Nasser Al-Jahwari and Mohammed Hussein from the Department of Archaeology at Sultan Qaboos University. Today, actually, we would like to talk about the discovery of two similar buildings that were found in two different settlements on both sides of Al-Hajar Mountains, dating back to Nar culture. And we will present some suggestions that may help to interpret this discovery. One of these sites is Dahwa, which is Dahwa settlement, which is located in the northern Batina on the eastern foothills of Al-Hajar Mountains, while the other one is in Al-Ghureen, located on the other side of Al-Hajar Mountains on the south or western foothills of Al-Hajar Mountains, with almost a distance almost about 200 kilometers between the two sites. First, for the first site or the first building at Dahwa, there at Dahwa we excavated we excavated 5 buildings there, as you see here. Our building that we are focusing today on is, we called it S10. This building is the largest building that we found at the site, and it has almost 228 square meters. And we excavated most part of this building. Just short introduction about the building. It's composed of 2 parts. A northern one, which is like the open courtyard, and the southern one, which is contain multiple rooms. This is the southern part of the main part of the building that we will focus our talk about this one. While the other building we found at Al-Ghureen, as I said, on the western foothills of the Al-Hajar Mountain. And there in Al-Ghureen, we excavated several buildings. These are the buildings. I'm not going to talk about them, but we will focus on this building. We called it S3, which is located, as you see here, almost in the central part of the settlement. This building was, and accidentally, is so far the largest building that we excavated in the settlement, with this size almost 600 square meters. Maybe there are some bigger than this at the settlement, but so far we didn't expose any other large buildings. And this one is also composed of 2 parts. A large, big, huge open courtyard, and a central building, the main core of the building, which is in the center of this building. Now, the question is, what's the similarities between these 2 buildings? There are similarities between these buildings actually mainly in the main part of the building, not in the open courtyards. So in Al-Ghureen, this is the main part of the building. This is what we are going to focus on, while in Dahwa, this is the main part of the building. So I would like to show you how we saw these 2 buildings are similar to each other. Also, as I said, the distance between themselves almost 200 kilometers and located on different sides of Al-Hajar Mountains. So the similarities between these 2 buildings can be examined through 2 main points. First, the architectural design, and second, we will talk about just briefly about the constructions technique. So the 2 buildings share a common architectural organization consisting of 2 principal components: a central core and open. This is central core of the building and open courtyards. Regarding the interior design, the main part of both buildings is divided into 2 distinct sections. An eastern section comprises between 3 to 5 rectangular rooms, and a western one contains only 2 elongated rooms. And there, as you see here, we have no direct connections between the 2 different sides of the building. So these 2 sides were separated by straight wall built like from double skin wall, separated the both sides. Very similar situation. So each section has a separate entrance. Also, as we see here, the entrances, for example, in both buildings, close to each other. But for some reason, they made two different entrances for these two sections. So the rooms in the eastern sections are open into a long corridor, as you see, the same design. We know, let's say, doorways. Specific doorways, but they made it always in the same design. Other similarities between these two buildings here, for example, that both buildings contain several fireplaces. For example, here in Dahwa, this is S10. We excavated just one building all the way to the earliest floor. So we see here, at least in the middle bay room, we found at least 7 almost fireplaces. We didn't excavate, of course, the other rooms all the way to especially the eastern side. We didn't excavate it to the earliest phase, but it shows that the building has several fireplaces. Now, we found almost the same situation in Al-Ghureen. Here, this is the central part, the main part of the building. There we found in the center part of the building more than 10 fireplaces, beside also the one outer side of the building. So this is also another common thing between these two buildings. This in regard to the design, the interior design of the building. Now, for regards to the construction technique, we found that both buildings also share the same technique. So these buildings were built from, like, the foundation of these buildings, since we can talk only sure about the foundation of these buildings, were built, as you see here, from well-constructed walls, built from double skin walls, and connected with right angles, these walls together. Regards to the floors, they were made from really compact, highly durable mud. Same technique, same almost material. No, so we were asking, like, okay, is there any differences in regards to the dating of these buildings? So in order to say maybe one copied the other, but based on the C14 samples that we collected from these two buildings, we found out that both buildings belong almost or dated to the same period, to the mid part of the 3rd millennium BC. So very close dates. I'm not going to show the exact dates because this is not our subject. But mainly it's just to say, like, these are very belong to the same time. Okay. Now, still, despite this many similarities between the two buildings, but there are, of course, some differences between them and variations, such as, for example, a difference in the overall size of the buildings. As I mentioned before, Al-Ghureen is it's double size than the one, more than double size than the one in Dahwa, with 600 square meters, and this one is almost 230 square meters. Also, the difference also evident in the size of the main part of the building. Oh, shukran, thank you. But the difference also in the main part of the buildings. Now here is the main part of Dahwa is double size, more than double size than the one in Al-Ghureen. He is like almost 120 square meters, while there in Al-Ghureen was 70 square meters. Other differences, the number of rooms regarding to the rooms, they are different, it differs despite the smaller size of the main building at Al-Ghureen, but it contains more rooms than the one in Dahwa. There we have like at least 8 rooms, while S10 in Dahwa we have 5 rooms. The most obvious, of course, differences between themselves is the open courtyard. As you see here, the open courtyard was connected to the northern side of building S10, while they surrounding the entire building, with, of course, much larger size. However, despite these differences, the overall layout of the two buildings are very similar, as you see here. Now, the question is, did the similarity between the two buildings at Dahwa and Al-Wareen remain limited to these two structures, or were there other similar buildings are found in these two settlements? Here, I would like to show you on top here, we have the buildings, the other structures from Dahwa sites. There, the Dahwa, we excavated two sites, Dahwa 1 and Dahwa 7. So these are the structures that we excavated there. And in the lower line here, we have the buildings from Al-Wareen. As you see, no other similar buildings were found at either site. So the similarity was limited. That's why we can say that the similarity was limited mainly exclusively to the two main buildings at Dahwa and Al-Wareen. So also another question that can be raised here is whether there were other similar architectural elements that spread across the wide cultural sphere of the Nar culture in Oman Peninsula. The answer, as all of you know, is that yes, because like the most important of these architectural elements are the tombs, which occur in in almost standardized form across the vast region. So that's why we can say that the same logic can be observed here in the buildings discussed here, suggesting that architecture within the Nar culture functioned as a shared cultural language. However, this does not mean, of course, that the remaining architectural elements were identical, nor that the two sites served the same function, as evidenced by the presence of a tower in Al-Wareen site while absent in Dahwa. So this discovery can be interpreted in several ways, and there may not be a single exclusive explanation. Rather, it may reflect a network of cultural, geographical, and economic factors. The most important possibilities that we think so far that could explain the emergence of this similarity are, for example, first, cultural unity and a shared architectural identity. The similarity between the two buildings may reflect the existence of an architectural pattern with the Nar culture. This suggests that groups belonging to this cultural shared inherited building traditions, common engineering knowledge, architectural symbols linked to identify the identity or function. Second, both buildings may have served similar functions, such as being maybe communal storage facilities or administrative buildings or structures associated with resource management, or all of them together, or maybe some other outside. It is therefore natural for them to resemble one another, as function can sometimes dictate form. So a third possibility is that there may have been movement of groups of craftsmen, as it is possible that skilled builders traveled between settlements. This could explain the precise similarities in construction techniques and overall planning, with the clearest example being the strong similarity in tombs buildings technique. So finally, it can be argued that the discovery of two similar buildings on opposite sides of Al-Hajar Mountains, spread by distance of more than 200 kilometers, supports the idea that Nar culture was regionally interconnected culture characterized by an economy that required mobility and organization rather than consisting of isolated community, active communications, and stable architectural traditions. So these are our thoughts. We wanted to share this with you in order maybe we can hear some other suggestions, other ideas. If you agree with us about they are very similar to each other. Thank you very much.
Hello? Yeah, working. Thank you very much, Professor Khaled Douglas. Is there any question for Khaled? Yeah, Jennifer.
Thank you, Dr. Khaled. That was a wonderful presentation. I'm going to ask you about
pottery. Have you looked at the assemblages associated with the two buildings in comparison? Do you see similar forms and wares coming out of both buildings that might give us some indication of function?
Actually, yes, of course, we studied the butter from both buildings. There are some differences. Okay, for example, that's why we published the material from Dahwa, and there we found several. For example, it was famous, that building with several black slip in those jars. And that's why we interpreted that building as a warehouse at that time, But once we start digging here in Al-Oreen, there, of course, the pottery was much less, almost different than there. But the architecture is similar, So the function still, we didn't finish yet the excavations there in Al-Oreen. We still need maybe 2 more seasons at least to explore, to expose the complete building, and then we will have more ideas about the function. But we were just, in this moment, we wanted to share this with you guys, that's to see like these similarities, because it was shocking, for us that to see. We were looking at the building, this Al-Oreen, that's just as a complete building. But when we saw just the main one, so we saw there are some kind of similarities, different than from Bat or from Ras Al-Jins or other buildings. Corey?
Thank you very much for this beautiful presentation. I have a question about the architecture. We have excavated a late Umana building. I don't dare to say house because we have so many earths inside on the small area devoted to inhabitation that I'm not sure it is a house, a real one. But we have discovered that it was very well built with small trenches, the foundation trenches for the external wall. And also there are bigger stones at the corner of the external wall. So did you observe such things in your own buildings? Please.
Yeah, of course, for sure. Yeah, there are some similarities. I didn't want to go in details about these buildings. I wanted to show the general layout of these buildings. Yeah, definitely, especially here in Dahwa, you see at the corners there are big stones, and even there are on some corners there were some stones coming out from the corner. We saw this repeated again in other buildings in Dahwa, for example. So this was one of the. As I said, the walls were really well built from the early phase, which is mid 3rd millennium BC. Later period, late Nar, the construction technique was much less. Yeah, we saw some changes, but the walls were not really straight, not well built. Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation, and it was great. And as you know, I'm passionate about architecture, so
I know.
I found it great.
Yeah, we tried to compare them with your buildings, but not
actually,
really.
It's more a comment than a question. So, in the Sharqiya, I saw a different size, also similarities in the architectures and the building techniques, and also proposed this idea, right, that there was this regional. Koinenda, where you would have the similarity of buildings, and then gave a recent presentation at the seminars where I was indeed looking also at something like your structures at Dahwa, just proposing that there could be these areas about 200, 250 kilometers with indeed common elements within the architectures, and others proposed also the graves more or less in the same area. So it's just to say that, this, I think, it's a model that works, and we should talk more about it.
Thank you. I don't want to talk about Tiqa. I will leave it for my colleague Sarah. She will present this later on, because we are digging there also in Tiqa, but a little bit different, which is much closer to Dahwa. Why we get this similarity with the other side of the mountain, but not Tiqa? We'll leave it for Sarah, and then we'll see it later on. Okay.
One last question.
Derek?
Yes.
Yeah, there.
Coming on the other side, yeah.
Thank you. Hi, Khalid. Thank you, Khalid. I had a question and a comment, actually.
Good.
I'm going to challenge you now. The wall between room 1 and 2 in the Gareen building, From the slide, it looks like it's got a continues up to the central wall. Can you see what I mean?
No.
So room 1 at the bottom right.
Right or left?
The right-hand side and the green building on the right-hand side at the bottom corner. From the slide, it looks like the wall continues, has a foundation at least, continuing until the central wall.
No, that's completely, it's for sure the wall is stopped there.
Okay.
For sure, yeah.
Okay.
Well, that you see, there's a trench there, so we found the foundation of the wall stopped there, so it's not continuing straight, you mean.
Okay. Thank you. So the comment was, there's this technique called access analysis that people sometimes use on buildings, and it looks at them in a different way. It looks at the depth, so that every time you go through a room, it adds a value of 1. So you can actually look at your rooms in terms of how far they are from the entrance, and it gives a sense of how secluded they are. And I'm just wondering, because on the Gorine building, by the bottom right-hand room, you've got a depth of 4, whereas in the Dahwa building, it's a depth of 2. I'm just thinking it might be interesting to apply it. It's very simple to apply, and it could give you a very different perspective on the building plans, Because I thought actually that some of your other buildings, some of them had these internal walls that didn't finish, they didn't come to the wall, didn't quite cross the whole building. And I wondered whether there wasn't some more similarity in those buildings as well, that we said that you weren't convinced, but I thought there maybe could be some similarity there as well, if you look at it in terms of depth and access analysis.
Okay.
I can give you a reference afterwards.
Well, okay.
If you're interested. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Then you look in the Loreen, we didn't finish yet all the rooms. And we still, as I said, we still have these 2 seasons there. But here and that was for sure, and they're also there. But there are some walls for the later phase. I'm talking about the earlier phase, that which is similar to the earlier phase in Dahwa, for sure. But in later phase, of course, there are some changes. I didn't want to go through these phases, but we just focus on this phase that's similar to this one. And for these walls, the extension of these walls, of course, there are some changes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much. And we're gonna listen to Professor Sara Pizzimenti now. And Sara Pizzimenti is going to present us the Omani-Italian archaeological expedition in Al-Tiha.
Thank you so much, Mathilde. Sorry for the noise. I'm a little bit lower in height than Khaled. So it's a joint presentation, of course, together with my colleagues Khaled Douglas and Nasser Al-Jawari. And as you know, we co-direct the Omani-Italian archaeological expedition at Al-Tiha. So today for us is a very brief presentation of our last results of the 2026 field season that just ended 2 days ago. So it's very new. It's much more where we are and where we're going. That's more or less our way. So you all know more or less where Tiha is, and also Khalid showed you in a map. So Tiha is in 42 kilometers southwest of the coastline, at the east foothills of the Al-Hajar Mountains. It's located in an interflow between Wadi Sakhtan and Wadi Al-Khashab. And the confluence is north of Rustak, of course, and all the site is just located on a very low, flat terrace along the west bank of the Wadi Al-Khashab. So those are the areas that we excavated so far. We have some areas that are in the Umanar settlement, some others that are the 2 towers that we started investigating that are within the site, and they face the western bank of the Wadi Khashab. And then finally, we do have a Numenor metallurgical workshop that is a very huge mound, Mount C, immediately north of our Umenar settlement. But this is what we've done so far in our 5 season. And what now we did during this season. So during the 2026 excavation season, we focused on 3 excavation areas, 2 of which we already started excavating in the past years. So the Mount C, the copper workshop, and the tower S30A Mount E. And then we started a new area in the Umanar settlement, and we will start talking about these areas. So we will go south, and then we will proceed toward north. So what about the Umanar settlement? Well, first of all, where we left. So at the end of the 2025 excavation season, we finished excavating. We completely exposed the building S1 under the supervision of Saraquaggio, and is, as you know, the largest building, the domestic area that we have so far detected is a little bit more than 500 square meters, and we detected 5 phases so far, with an architectures that we started discovering as equal also in the new area that we opened, with a mix of walls with a stone foundation, a stone plinth, and an elevation in mud bricks, and walls that some of which appears just to be mud brick wall, and the foundation is just a layer of pebbles. We do have 8 rooms and a courtyard, and we were able to rebuild and reconstruct all the inner circulation within the building, and we do think that we do are in front of something that can be considered administrative function, because we found during the last seasons the 3 seals within phase 3 of our building S1, 2 of which are absolutely Umanar, and the last one is the one up to the left is unfinished, and we were talking with also Dennis about what it could be, and probably something that is much more related to the Indus Valley tradition. Please, Dennis, tell me if I'm wrong. But what we did this season, we decided then, because we finished excavating S1 and S2, the 2 structures that we excavated in the previous season, we decided to move toward north, and we opened a new area in the northernmost limit of the settlement, very close to Mount A, which is our limit of the Umanar settlement, this artificial mound structure that border to the north of the settlement, at least for what we know so far. And we wanted to better understand how this works and how this interact with the settlement. We opened it under the supervision of Saraquaggio still, that moved from building S1 to building S9, quite a big, large area. It's about 10 meters per 23, and we excavated it mostly extensively, and we detected a total of 3 phases so far. So the earliest one, that we call 2B, has been detected in more or less 20 by 9 meters, so all the central and southern parts of the area. And what is absolutely visible is that we do have structures, a building, a rectangular-ish one, that can be inserted more or less in the tradition that already Khaled shows. Of course, these are just preliminary, so it's something that we just discovered, and we need much more of study and enlargement of the area that we discussed with the team in order to better understand it. And that's just part, probably the latest phase of this building, because we didn't reach the bottom and the foundation. So we can see much more when we'll extend toward east or toward south. But as you see, even here, as in building S1, you do have a mixture of walls that are with a stone plinth and an elevation that should be in mud brick, and we also found one wall with a couple of mud bricks on the top of it, and so we can confirm it, of course. And we do have other walls that looks to be similar to the one in mud bricks that we found still in building S1. Since something changed in the phase after, the 2A, so we do have a change in how the area is, and we now have a very big open area and around the structures. And in the big open area, what is really significant is this big round platform that I'm showing you and pointing you with the arrows. Like, it was very difficult to detect and to find because it was just under the surface and was not really well visible, but it was there. I know you have to trust me, but trust our work. And that's what we do have, together with other stones platform and structures that are related still to this big open space. And what we do have also is very smaller structures, much more roundish in if we want to look at the shape.
And finally, we do have the latest phase, the phase 1, which has been found just in the northernmost part of the trench. So it's not 10 by 3 meters or maybe a little bit more, but it's just preserved here because, of course, we do have the slope, and so the rest has been completely eroded. It's a very faint one, actually, and preserved for a height of, I don't think, more than 3 or 4 centimeters, Sarah, right? And so we have just one mud brick wall with 2 rectangular benches in mud bricks that abuts it. And then we have a couple of installations in pebbles so far, but that's what we have so far. This is the latest, and of course, the plan for the next season is to extend our excavation toward the north and toward the west to understand how and which is, first of all, the dating, because we don't have that much, but then, of course, the relationship with the Mount A and the rest of the phases that we do have and the other structures that we already excavated in the settlement. Then we move a little bit to the north, out of the Manar settlement, and we do have our metallurgical workshop that we already started excavating in the previous season, actually the first season in 2022, and then we decided to expand the excavation area every single time because we're talking about the biggest mound that we do have here, and also Nikos that are talking later on did some work of DPR here. We're talking about the 30 centimeter mound, so it's quite a big mound and it needs a little bit to be completely excavated. So that's where we ended at the end of the 2025 season. We do have an open corridor, several structures, and the orientation is north, south, east, west. What we do have are walls. They are completely different than the ones that we see in the settlement because we do have a double face wall made with stones that comes from the wadi and filled with gravels and pebbles. This season, we decided to concentrate our operation in 2 areas. So we decided to go down in the previous phase where we already excavated in the southern part of the mound, the southeastern, and then we made a deep cleaning all around. And we were able so far to detect all the eastern limit of the structure and even the northeastern corner. So at the end, it looks to be a really massive building, and it's about 30 meters in length. Then we don't know how wide it is, if we have 1 building or 2, but so far, all this seems to belong to the same structure. Here it is. If you look at all the walls, we do have the same building technique, but the orientation change. We don't have anymore the north, south, east, west orientation, but everything is switched and turned a little bit 45 degrees, and we have a northeast, southwest orientation, so they changed the planimetry. And we still have, however, a big open space with this structure, the C-shaped, semi-circular structures, massive and consistent, that is just in what is the biggest area of the structure. And what is interesting is that's one, and I'm pointing you with the arrows. The interesting things, and that's just in front of it, within the circular structure, we found quite a number of keel linings. And together with this, in this same area, we do have several mud brick platform, rectangular. We don't have the complete shape because they go through the section. We need to expand the area, of course, to detect it all. And all around, we found quite a big number of slags, among which also tap slags. So we can relate this place absolutely to copper production and to massive copper production, because we found this type of slag, of course. Then when we move to the rest of the area that we clean and scraped a little to try to find at least the eastern limit, we do have something that is absolutely continuous, and what is really interesting is that we think that we could have found a sort of entrance of secondary access with a very gentle slope that let the people go into this part, at least this part of the mound, which is even the highest part of the mound if we want to look at the DEM. And our plan, of course, here will be enlarge into the north and to the east, so that we hope that in a couple of seasons we will have the entire planimetry, at least the outer boundary of the structure, and to know more about what's happening inside. But we can absolutely confirm that we are in front of a copper workshop. Then what about the Human Knot Tower as a 30X, the Mount D? That's the last that area that we excavated so far. We started it in 2023, and then we continued during all the following years under the supervision of Emanuele Taccola and Chiara Tarantino. And that's the situation that we have so far. We know that it's a very big Human Knot Tower. It's big, let's say, among the regular sizes. We're talking about 18 meters in diameters with all outer spaces that surround it, and even a ditch that surrounds all the tower and that it's directly connected with the wadi. So it cuts the bedrock and is directly connected in the wadi. We were able to detect part of it, especially with the cut in the northern part that goes into the wadi, and a little bit also from the area view, and because of the vegetation. And with Emanuele, we try to really better understand how it is, but what is missing, and we need to really know what's happening into the southern part. So here, what we have so far. In the Human Knot Tower, we decided to open 2 different areas, one of which has been already started to be excavated in the previous season. It's the room just in the center of the tower. We wanted to understand all the sequence where we do have the well, and then we decided to expand the area toward west of the outer part, the northern outer part of the tower. And finally, we also cleaned a little a structure that is immediately west of it, and it looks to us to be probably a Human Knot Tower. We wanted to understand which was the relationship, but we just cleaned, and it's necessary to have another season. It looks, however, that maybe is later, respecting all this, is absolutely later respect to the Human Knot layers that we do have. So we have a time maybe during which the late Human Knot period, this tower is no more in use and has been dismissed, but we need to check it with the future excavation. Right, Emanuele? We need to go further. So the big discovery, one of the discoveries of this year, is that we do have, for the first time, because the previous season we haven't, we do have Iron Age reuse of the structure so far. And this is true for a floor where we had some Iron Age shards in it, and some structure that looks a little bit of reuse, and also the Human Knot Tower that we clean at the end of the season probably does have some reuse during the Iron Age. And nearby the tower, we also had T1 and T2 areas that Emanuele and Chiara excavated in the previous season that has absolutely Iron Age reuse. So we know that during the Iron Age, this part of the city had been subject of activities and reuse of previous structures. What about the main phases of the tower? So that's what we excavated last year, and it's viewed from the north over there, and it's part of the outer structures of the tower. And we do have a sort of steps, a really staircase with an entrance when you can see the orange arrow that lets to go up, climbing, and then will lead you within the rooms that surround the tower, that especially after this season seems to continue even to the west and to surround the tower in a radiant way. And of course, they are divided in 2. So we have at least 1, 2, 3, and 4 different ambient, or 5, that can be absolutely detected with different Human Knot plaster floor, because we do have several phases, of course, that are superimposed, and For some of the structures, it's absolutely clear that we do have a stone plinth and an upper part of the walls in mud bricks, as this one that's been perfectly preserved. And we do have more than 30 centimeters of mud brick, upper structures in mud brick that is absolutely and very well preserved. What about the room within the tower when we do have the well? So here we defined several working surfaces, every one of which is directly related to copper processing, probably, especially very nice, and for us it was really something nice to find, is this working surfaces. These are the circle of pebbles that was heavily burned with traces of fire. And all around these working surfaces, what has been detected are several roasted minerals. So what we can say that even this tower should be connected, and is confirmed for what we already thought last year, to the copper processing. And at least here, what we can say is that we do have the roasting of the minerals that took place here in this room when they have the abundance even of water because of the well that was nearby. A well that, of course, because of the repaving and continuous height that changes of the floor because of all this workshop activities, needed during the time a little bit of reinforcement to still stay in place and continue to be used over time. The tower led us a little bit of discovery this year in terms of findings. If we want to see the pottery, well, the Umanar Tower gave us quite an amount of local pottery, but also of imported pottery coming from the Indus Valley. But a real nice discovery this year was the recovery of a shell inlay, this rectangular one that reminds a lot about what Derek found in the survey and has been published by Sandram Simpson. So my idea, our idea actually, is that this shell inlay is a Mesopotamian one related to the polymetallic statuary of the early dynastic period, and still from the same tower, we finally found a Neo Dynastic I Mesopotamian pottery sherd. It's not in a primary context, unfortunately, but still is an evidence. And it's a jar that has this peculiar allotment for the lid. And we do have absolutely a comparison that comes from Lagash in the Early Dynastic I layers, the HL18 type after the typology that Steve Renette made in 2021. And if we also look at both the surface treatment and both also the fabric, it definitely looks like to come from southern Mesopotamia. I don't want to say Lagash region, but it's looking a lot similar to the one that we excavated also in Lagash. And with this last Mesopotamian connection of Tira with southern Mesopotamia, I want, of course, to thank you so much for your kind attention. I want to thank all the sponsors, the Ministry of Heritage and Tourism, the Sultan Qaboos, the University of Pisa, and all the people and the team that worked at our site this year. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sara. Do we have time for a short question? Anyone? No question. Well, thank you very much. We're going to move on to the next presentation.
Good.
Okay. By Nikos Ekonomou, who is going to present us some data about geophysics, artificial intelligence, and early bronze settlements.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. First of all, I want to thank you, to thank the Ministry of Heritage and Tourism and the Sultan Qaboos University for inviting me to this conference. This presentation is connected with the two previous ones, because it's in some areas of these two cities, Al-Tiha and Al-Goruin. This is the team. The title, of course, is it was mentioned before. It's it's geophysics. Okay, it's measurements from above the ground to try to see indications of what is buried beneath and image the subsurface structure. It's a cooperation between Technical University of Crete, where I work, Sultan Qaboos University and University of Pisa. Here we have two departments of Sultan Qaboos University, the Department of Archaeology and the Department of Earth Science.
Yes.
We will mainly show results of the measurements and processing of the data which we have done since 2022 until today. It's an ongoing research. As we understand, every year there are excavations. Whenever it's possible, we make some measurements, we cooperate, we interpret, and we try to inform each other and combine our findings. The research objectives here are to delineate the buried antiquities, but having a low geophysical contrast. I will explain later why this contrast is low. In general, geophysics detect contrast of physical properties. And we will show some dedicated methodologies which are needed to image the antiquities at EBA sites because there are these towers and several other features. So the outline is, I will show the data acquisition and processing for Altija. I will show you the combined interpretation of different geophysical methods and a few results from the second site, algorithm settlements, and some results and discussions at the end. You have seen these two cities before, so there's nothing more to say. This is a map from Altija. We'll start with this settlement. We started, as I said before, in 2022. You can always look at the pictures to understand the year, upper right. In every picture, we have different years. This is Mount C, which was presented in the previous presentation, before excavation. The known place we had is this in the center, where a part of a buried wall was visible. We used GPR. Probably you all know it. It's a method of electromagnetics. It's useful and it's very effective in dry soils, like this one. And it's a high-resolution method in general. So we did parallel lines every half a meter, and we separated Mount C in two parts because we don't want the lines to be very long because the method worked with an odometer, a wheel that measures the distance. And this place is really rough terrain because it has a lot of stones, so the wheel may lose some measurements, so it's better to be shorter lines. We decided that this length was okay. This is a picture from the measurements. It's parallel lines. This is the part, is the covered wall, which we knew. The first objective here was to see the continuity, the possible continuity of this wall. And of course, to see the effectiveness of the method. It was a pilot research in general. So, when we have these methods, general geophysics, are planned mainly to measure in straight terrain. When you have topography, topographical variations, you have to do corrections. This is a common GPR section. I can say two words for you to understand what exactly GPR does. It sends electromagnetic radiation into the ground, and wherever this radiation meets different dielectric properties, it sends a reflection back. Then it continues and sends another reflection. This is a reflection, for example. Here you can see with white color, V-shaped. So you can see what is where you can see the electric heterogeneities. Okay, we could see that. Here you don't see depth as expected, you see time. We measure the magnetic field in time. And with some, when we know the electromagnetic velocity propagation, we can convert this to depth. We will see depth in the next slides. So, except reflections, there are also some diffractions and several other features which we do not need to explain. These diffractions are like opposite V-shaped. They have kinematic characteristics of the propagation of the electromagnetic radiation, and they can give us information about the velocity I was telling to you, which we can use to convert it, the section to depth. But not only that, we can interpret the velocity. You will see later how. So we use artificial intelligence to detect these features, these V-shaped hyperbolas, and then we use a method which we can extract the velocity in different places, and it is useful to do both the corrections and to interpret it. So from here, we get this velocity section. It is a corrected section with terrain. You can see the terrain is like this. And you can see how the EM, the electromagnetic signal propagates into the ground. With cool colors, it's low velocity. With hot colors, it's higher velocity. Higher velocity means we have no water or clay. Low velocity means we may have water or clay. So here we could say that the first layer is, can be interpreted easily. As we see, we have dry pebbles and stones and things like that, so it's high velocity. Yeah. This layer of blue color, it's under discussion here. So this velocity can be interpreted, as I told you before, but it can also be used to correct the section itself, which shows the reflections, which is of high resolution. The velocity is not of high resolution, it's a little bit blurred. So with this information, we can correct now the GPR section, and we see again two reflections which were corrected. They were like this, and now they're almost horizontal. Showing different layers. Probably most of you, if you have seen geophysics, you are most familiar with maps. For example, horizontal maps. So here we can extract either depth slices, which are done by the yellow lines, okay, specific depth beneath surface, or elevation slice, horizontal, depending on what we want to see. This is a picture showing that the material here is similar. I mean, it's stone, bigger stones, smaller stones, so there's not so much variation in the properties in general. This is why we thought it would be difficult to interpret the data. This is Mount C. This is an example of depth slice, the same depth. It's a pre-excavation, fast processing. I mean, we didn't really do anything. It was automatically, we could put the algorithm of the artificial intelligence, we detected hyperbolas, we gained the velocities, and we took the slices, we cut the sections, and we have this, the south part. Okay, we see the continuation. The dark blue color here is the excavated part. So we see the continuity of this feature, and of course, more to the north. These are the preliminary, before excavation results. So the excavation came in several seasons, from 2022 when we did this work, 2024, 25, we see these maps which were also seen in the previous presentation. And then we did some extensive processing to see more details, where we can see this slice, as we say, it's in a depth around 20 centimeters. And this is the interpretation. I mean, with white color down below, down the right, you can see the features which were excavated. Then, with other colors, we have drawn some areas which deserve attention and probably some preliminary excavation to see if there is also something there, because they seem like anthropogenic anomalies.